The Earth was invaded from the game, the Matrix was rebooted 100%, everything changed, the ecology of the Earth, life, the existence of people themselves. Various monsters have appeared which could previously be seen in computer games and have now become a reality. All the characters created from computers broke out into the real world. Now such monsters as a half-horse, half-griffin attacked and tore people apart. The only ones who could help this world were the players. Tyler Jones, a solo game designer, 25 years old, works without a team, creates the entire game process himself. At the same time, he learns programming, develops design, and spends his entire life developing the most incredible characters. There are 2 months left and Tyler plans to end it. This is definitely luck. Everything is working out for the best. Until the moment when the smartphone started playing, and from there came shrill and so familiar screams when he was going to pay the rent. Our hero turns on his brain 100%, which generates another excuse, this time one that will make his sister, that is, the owner of the apartment, give him a couple more days. This game will definitely be a hit. Yeah, look for the fools, the owner replies and reminds that his previous game, Survival in the Apocalypse, which was also supposed to become a mega hit, was bought by only 10 users. And even earlier there was Rose, and even earlier Beaver Run, for which there was only one buyer, and that was herself. Tyler, as usual, made excuses that no one understood those games, but this one will definitely break records. But this did not impress his sister, and she gave him until tomorrow or she would fly out of the apartment. After looking at his balance on the card, the guy sadly thought that he needed to become more serious. And what is needed for this? Just speed up the development process and everything will be okay? But the acceleration process never started and was interrupted by the monitor screen going dark. Before the guy could swear, the monitor lit up on its own during the development process and began to independently correct, refine the design, and remove errors. Tyler clicked on the buttons, but the program seemed to have a life of its own, which is why everything looked like it was coming to life. Something is clearly going wrong. The system is overloaded. Damn, what's going on? The monitor is smoking. That's it. I'm finished, the guy thought. Although why didn't the monitor go dark, moreover? New character models started loading. 10% loading, 30% loading, and full loading 100%, our hero closed his eyes from the bright light hitting him from the screen. Suddenly, everything started shaking and swaying. The house seemed to start dancing. Could it really be an earthquake? High-rise building, need to get out before it slams shut. Tyler jumped up and tried to feel for the handle. Opening the door, he rushed out of the apartment and ran up the stairs. But what he saw on the street was cooler than any fantasy. It was as if he found himself in a computer game. Huge roots of incomprehensible plants wrapped around skyscrapers and streets. They grew up everywhere, raking up everything they came across along the way. Cars, road asphalt. People ran in panic in all directions and screamed. Tyler stood there unable to move. He looked at the tree. It seemed familiar to him. Was he even sleeping, or was all this reality? People running in panic shouted that their mobile phones were not receiving a signal. Someone pointed to the sky. Helicopters were visible there, and something incomprehensible was flying nearby. It was a huge creature with the head of a griffin and the body of a horse that could fly. It destroyed the helicopter, which exploded as it fell. The horror of chaos filled the street. The crackling and noise of the falling helicopter and the unknown creature drowned out everything around. The little girl, who was ignored by everyone, fell, crushing her toy bunny, and closed her eyes in horror. The predatory creature was already touching the ground with its beak, and the huge machine covered the people. Tyler, seeing the child, rushed into the crowd, which demolished everything in its path. The huge creature opened its beak and found itself next to the girl. She sat with her eyes wide in horror. In the last seconds, the guy grabbed the child, barely dodging the attacking monster, and started running. Everything fell apart before our eyes. The monster let out a terrible roar. He covered the girl's ears and ran as fast as he could. A giant unicorn wolf was running towards them, growling madly. At that moment, the griffin horse charged at the wolf, and the two monasteries began to fight. Tyler was lying on the ground covering the girl and looking with all his eyes at the monster. It was a dino-horned wolf from the elite monster category. The advantage is a sharp and strong horn, has a special skill such as lightning charge. It seems he will no longer have to pay rent. When the guy opened his eyes, he was surprised that he was still alive. He was in a hospital room. Tyler sat up in bed and discovered a sleeping girl next to him, the same one he had saved. Reaching for the remote control, he turned on the TV. The first channel was broadcasting shocking news, so this was not a dream. Here is a presenter reporter broadcasting about a monster more than 5,000 meters high, and examining this tree monster, she only reached its waist. Here the presenter was attacked by a giant bat, discovered in the depths of this abyss. It was something gigantic in size with huge red eyes. Another TV channel called on all players to come to the government building to fight monsters. Tyler's mouth dropped open in surprise. Why players, although these monsters are like in his New World fantasies? That is, the game he was developing moved from the computer into the real world. Tyler went into the game app and saw that he couldn't change his inventory. He had the rank of peasant. Well, how is it that he is the designer of this game, but he can't become a player? What's the big deal? At that moment, the door opened and a girl entered the hospital room. The little girl, who had already woken up, darted behind the bed. Tyler pretended to be asleep. Waving the bag, the girl said that there was no need to pretend his TV was working. Smiling awkwardly, Tyler asked how she ended up here, to which the owner of the apartment, Eileen, taking groceries out of a bag, replied that she clearly hadn't planned to visit him, but they called her and told her that he had ended up here. She also noted that if Tyler died, she would never get paid for the rent. Then she saw a girl who began to wake up, rubbing her eyes. The next moment, Eileen and Tyler were shocked when the girl, screaming for her dad, rushed to hug Tyler. Eileen asked him if he had a daughter, but our hero explained how things were, how he lost consciousness, found her on the street, she lost her memory, then they had to register the girl as a lost child. Eileen started messing around with the girl, she was the cutest thing, and on the wave of such cuteness, Tyler decided to try to lower the rent. Of course, the landlady agreed because her tenant had become a single father, but before the guy could rejoice, she threw him checks for $8,000 for the hospital, treatment, and the room she had paid for. After the disaster, people used nuclear bombs on the giant tree and in the abyss. But this had no effect. On the contrary, people lost half of the sky and their territory. 6 months later, Tyler was getting ready for a mission, and the girl who lived with him was bringing him his uniform. She dragged the shield with effort, and the guy thanked Mendy, calling her a wonderful girl. Mendy is the name Tyler gave her because she didn't remember her own, and he posted an ad online with this name to look for her parents. Some people came with the desire to adopt her, but they were all suspicious. Mendy hid, not wanting to part with her adoptive father. Here came another candidate, calling himself the child's uncle, stating that a tragedy had happened to her parents. When Tyler asked what the girl's name was, the man answered in surprise, "Isn't it Mendy?" And now the news shows the good uncle being led away in handcuffs. Thanks to Tyler, a large gang of child kidnappers was arrested. 6 months have passed. Mendy's memory has not been restored, her parents have not been found, but fortunately she is an obedient child and helps around the house. True, after such help, the enraged Eileen only had time to write out bills for TV repairs and house repairs. One day, Tyler decided to send the girl to an orphanage, but seeing her crying and reaching out to him, he decided to go to the orphanage. His heart couldn't take it. He picked her up in his arms and carried her home. Here, Tyler went on a mission. He needed to catch underground monsters, which are strong, and wild ones, which are somewhat weaker. He started digging when 2 angry eyes of a unicorn rabbit looked at him from the hole. The next minute, the rabbit jumped up and wanted to attack the guy, but he put up a shield into which the rabbit flew with its horn. Then he killed him with a shovel. But the notification showed that even though he killed the horned rabbit, he couldn't get experience. Having killed the rabbits, the plan for today was completed, and the title of Rabbit Hunter was received. As a game designer, Tyler created not only characters but also many levels and titles. Initially, the Rabbit Hunter level was unique. According to the game's plot, an ordinary NPC becomes the hero of the game New World Fantasies after activating a hidden plot. He joins the players and defeats the Demon King. Tyler discovers this NPC and begins to interfere with him, killing horned rabbits. Just half a year ago, it was impossible for an NPS to become a player. Give up, it's also a choice. How can you kill these rabbits? They're so cute. When he created a dumb NPS that kills rabbits, he didn't expect that he would become one. I lured a bunch of rabbits with a carrot, and now I've also lured an armored wild boar. Only from the boar you need to flee, especially when he is enraged, and after that the NPS did not appear here anymore. Every player now had their own level in the real world, contributing their achievements. So Tyler came to the department to hand over the caught and killed rabbits. He heard himself called a killer of horned rabbits, who is afraid to go down into the dungeon. How can such a coward be given the status of a player? Well, let him already be engaged in supplies. What kind of player am I? I'm the designer of this game, Tyler thought gloomily as he approached the counter where a man in a rabbit costume was waiting at the reception. Uncle Gene smiled broadly. He had the status of owner of rabbit heads. Uncle Gene's sharp rabbit heads increase movement speed by 5% for 5 minutes. While handing over the rabbits, a girl peered out from behind the wall. His uncle thanked him and gave him a portion at the house's expense, since things had not been going well lately. Lucia appeared, a girl with cat ears and a cloak, looking at him in surprise. And finally, the key figure rises to the stage. He recognized her. Lucia is not an ordinary character. She is a divine spirit, one of the few in the game. According to the main plot, after the hero killed 10,000 horned rabbits, a young girl decided that the boy had a strong will and blessed him, and he became a hero. But the girl's appearance became far from divine. Grabbing the guy with incredible force, she growled that he was a vile killer. Rabbits were so cute. Tyler thought that the plot had changed. Screaming that he had killed as many as 10,000 poor Milas, she spun him around in a grab and pinned him to the floor. Now he himself resembled a hunted rabbit. This is the same Lucia. How could she turn into a demon because of killing rabbits? But the public around thought something completely different. They considered Tyler a pervert who was harassing Lucia. That damn system, Tyler thought. It improved everything on its own, and here's the result. Although, what is this? The system sent a notification for killing 10,000 horned rabbits. The goddess Lucia cursed him. He loses the status of a human and becomes a player, level 1, demon. The boy cried with joy and couldn't believe it. Being a demon wasn't so bad at all. He rushed to kiss her feet, but the goddess called him trash and kicked the guy away with all her might. Now, in the status of a player, he can use functions that were previously unavailable to him, such as the same inventory. Now he won't have to carry a bunch of things on himself, while he has the ability to instill demonic fear at the rank of a human. Demons have excellent command of extremely high agility and defense, have mastered the use of weapons in both hands to perfection, and see perfectly in the dark. System notifications started coming in. He unlocked a new race. To enter the game lobby, you need to reach level 10. An anonymous player was attacked by a goddess and received a rare race and opened a hidden plot. All the gamers present received such a notification about Tyler's achievements. Many could not hide their amazement. Tyler kept his eyes on the messages. People were talking about how they also dreamed of being cursed by the goddess. Perrin dreamed of hugging the legs of this beautiful goddess. At this time, in the office of the Notification Supervision Association, the boss with a cigar was studying this significant event. The chairman of the association, Sheldon, level 59, asked his assistant that apparently this was a very significant event for the city. The girl reported that the city's subordinate guild, S. Leilun, recently completed a B-rank dungeon. According to the informant's report, the guild has not made contact with the goddess. Reported by the General Secretary of the Supervision Association, Bianca, level 25. Sheldon asked if there was anything unusual in the game lobby. Bianca reported about one player who hunted horned rabbits, angered the NPC with this, and was mercilessly beaten for educational purposes. Did this little Tyler chuckle, boss? The assistant asked if this meant that Mr. Sheldon was watching him. He replied that he knew the boy's father, and that when she had some free time, she should find him. He would be useful to the supply group. On a pasture outside the city, Tyler engages in his usual trade of hunting horned rabbits. An angry rabbit rushes towards him from the hole at great speed, shovel at the ready. Here is one already nailed down, lying on the ground. A notification appeared that he defeated the horned rabbit and received 10 experience points, level 1. The guy enthusiastically went to mow down the others, happy that now as a player he could pump up experience. The rabbits looked at him angrily from all sides, ready to attack. Previously, he would have immediately run away when faced with a crowd of rabbits, but this time, he decided to accept the challenge. After he became a demon and his stats increased, the horned rabbits seemed very slow to him. They moved as if in slow motion, making them even easier to catch. And now the level has been increased to 2, plus the racial skills demonic intimidation. This also has a very impressive effect on these creatures. This skill stuns the animals, and they all lay peacefully in the clearing. As the player's level increased, the amount of experience gained for killing low-level monsters decreased. Looks like hunting horned rabbits no longer gives experience. You'll have to hunt higher-level monsters. As in many games, each time the player levels up, he gets 1 attribute point. And waiting for what to use the characteristic points until he saw a huge rabbit running towards him. This is the king of rabbits, and he designed it himself. Tyler remembered that this boss was designed to have good speed, skin density, and was a real nightmare for those with low levels. The only way to defeat such a boss is to use a ranged weapon, and a bow is the best choice. Well, we need to act, find a way, and defeat the big guy. And why did he create this big guy? Tyler opened his character window and studied the benefits. Yes, the monster certainly inspires fear, but he is no longer an ordinary person. In a warrior's pose, the guy with a shovel and a shield stood in front of the beast, whose gaze did not bode well. He reassured himself that his physical strength was superior to that of a mere beginner, and that he was also of the demon race. And then the rest of the rabbits, who had long dreamed of getting even with their executioner, came running to the leader. Tyler dropped everything and ran from the field, skipping. The beast did not lag behind. The guy barely had time to dodge, getting into a kind of excitement, teasing the boss that he could not do anything to him. The boss wanted to pierce him with a horn, but our hero was happy with his pumped-up sleight-of-hand skills, how it saved him at that moment. The rabbit gnashed his teeth, becoming even more angry, and with a group of his relatives rushed at Tyler. He ran, realizing that with such pressure even sleight of hand would not save him. The speed and anger of the monsters was gaining momentum. Screaming in horror, Tyler ran, trying to escape from the vicious, horned mass that was chasing him. The boss almost pierced him with his horn, but the guy managed to dodge at the last moment. The rabbit paused, gathering all its strength and power to crush this little man. With incredible speed, the monsters rushed at Tyler. He saw the end of the clearing and decided that if he ran there, then his salvation would be there. There were players standing in the clearing while Tyleo was shouting that the pasture boss and the king of the rabbits were already here. The 2 boys chuckled. The king of rabbits means he can drop expensive items. They shouted for him to hold on. They were already coming. At that moment, the horned boss flew out. As a result, the entire team ran screaming, underestimating their strength. Tyler shouted to the boys that he needed to run to his daughter to feed her lunch. Perhaps he would go. They shouted at him to wait for them. How could he run so fast? One of the horned rabbits bit into the player's ass. Tyler finally arrived home. It was already dusk. The lights were on in the windows. He was met by a pleased Mendy, happy about her dad's return. The girl joyfully rushed to hug her adoptive father, expressing love and affection with her whole being. Tyler playfully patted his daughter on the nose and asked what she had been doing today. Mendy showed off the sketchbook that her sister owner gave her. After Tyler adopted Mandy, Eileen began to visit them often to help take care of the baby. She strictly warned not to do anything suspicious with Mandy. They sat down opposite each other and the girl enthusiastically told how she filled out the sketchbook. Then Tyler remembered it was time for dinner and decided to go and cook rice. After he became a house husband, he began to experiment with cooking rice. Opening the shelves where rice and other cereals were stored, he realized that there was nothing there, and the refrigerator was also empty. Approaching his daughter, he said that there was no more food. A few seconds later, the girl pulled him by the sleeve and laughed and said that she was not hungry at all. He thought about what Mendy's diet had been like all this time: fried rice with mustard, porridge with sugar, half a loaf of bread. He is a lousy father, and since he adopted her, the girl has not lived a normal life. He stroked her head and asked if she liked fried chicken. The little girl beamed and replied that she liked it very much. Then she suddenly became sad and said that she didn't like chicken at all. Tyler wondered why this was. Then the girl explained that if they spent too much on food, Dad wouldn't have money to pay the rent. Yes, exactly, 3 months of rent owed, house repairs, medical bills. But confidently opening his account, he declared that today they would eat well, and from today on they would say goodbye to their impoverished lifestyle. He ordered the Silver family dinner, 5-piece crispy chicken and 4-piece delicious chicken breast and spicy wings. After the disaster, many players became like folk idols and were admired by most people. Someone had a strong body, saving beauties in trouble. Others began to possess healing abilities that defied explanation. But the most important thing is that they are all very rich. If you have player status, you can enter the dungeon. There you can earn magic crystals by killing monsters. Hooray, Tyler, now he will get rich. A sumptuous family silver dinner has been delivered. Tyler and Mandy ate and cried with happiness. It was comparable to a miracle and magnificent bliss. Tyler looked into the room where Mandy was already sleeping, sprawled out in her sleep. The guy covered her with love and care, and the girl even muttered about delicious food in her sleep. Our hero sat down at the monitors reading the latest news. Yesterday, the king of horned rabbits was discovered along with ordinary rabbits. They attacked a group of 4 people who were taken to hospital. Their lives are not in danger. It's a good thing they didn't die, Tyler thought. Otherwise, he would have felt guilty. The presenter commented on the incident, referring to the testimony of survivors. The group leader relied too much on guides and was unable to adapt. This was perhaps the worst incident since the disaster, and the dungeon had changed with more floors and a new boss. And all because the system improves itself, adding more and more game information. In this cruel world, even if you succeed 99 times and fail once, it is this failure that everyone will remember. After this incident, Tyler stopped downloading guides and again found himself on a green plane. No money, he needs to get it. He can eat 1 or 2 times a day, but Mandy can't. Her daughter needs to eat well. So, now he is a level 4 player and needs to reach level 10 in the first half of the day. And in the evening, go to the dungeon and earn magic crystals. Armored boars are very ferocious, and they don't drop crystals, so most players think that killing them is a thankless task. If you kill 100 boars, his experience will double, so this is the fastest way to get level 10. I killed a boar and got 10 experience points. I killed another one with a shovel. That's great. Well, it's not that difficult, our hero thought until he heard a fierce growl behind him. Oh, those were the boar daddies. He underestimated the situation. They were rushing at him in an angry herd. So, the skill Swift Demon Wrath has been updated? Well, it's time to try it out in the updated format. By activating the demonic fear, all the boars that were running towards him were defeated. It had a stunning effect. So many armored boars were defeated at once. Here is level 10. He received the transition. Now he can go to the dungeon. He's half an hour behind schedule, but otherwise everything is going as planned. He needs to get into the dungeon. This is the lair of the Northern Wolf of Fell. In total, you have 60 minutes to complete the game. There are 2 types of dungeons in the new world, fixed and random. In the locked dungeons, there is a gate and monsters cannot leave it. After the player passes it, it is reset. Random ones have an entrance in the form of a crack. They can appear anywhere in the city or on the outskirts. After humans dropped a nuclear bomb on the Sky Tree, it began to destroy all technologies inside the barrier. If the car approaches the barrier, the part that touches the barrier will catch fire. Transportation around the Sky Tree is horse-drawn carriages, with free passage for players. Tyler rode in the cart and admired the beauty of the clearing. After all, nature is beautiful when man does not interfere with it. He arrived at the entrance to the location. This is the lair of the Fell Wolf. As in many similar games, there are escorts. These are high-level players who escort you into the dungeon for money. The task states that you have an hour to complete it. It's a bit scary to go like this for the first time. Then a guy ran up to him offering his services as an escort, saying that there was 1 spot left. Tyler almost passed out after learning the price. No, he could probably handle it himself somehow. Suddenly he saw familiar guys, the same ones with whom he had run away from the rabbits. Looking at them, Tyler noted that they had improved greatly, their equipment had improved, but before he could turn on incognito mode, they responded to him. One of this group shouted, "Great buddy," and also that there were 4 of them, and they were looking for 1 more to go through the dungeon. Would he like to join them? Tyler didn't expect such an offer and was about to quietly slip away. He agreed, pulled on his mask, and when asked questions, explained that he was a miner. Miners are players who do not fight in the dungeon, but mine ore, the player thought for a moment, and then said that miners would also be quite suitable for them. The crystals are divided equally. Tyler was relieved equipment would be advantageous. They shook hands, may the cooperation be fruitful. They opened the gates of the dungeon and entered. Since the heavenly tree rejects all technology, the group used torches. It was dark and torches weren't always convenient, but Tyler had an advantage. The demonic eye gave excellent night vision. One of the guys stopped. The E-level demonic magic crystals sparkled with green light. At that very moment, unicorn wolves began to emerge from the darkness of the cave. This is a level 12 armored fell wolf. The shooter guy took it upon himself to distract the enemy's attention so that the team could go into battle. The wolves rushed to attack with an angry growl. The team grouped together. A guy with a long sword weapon hit one, warning his friends that others were sneaking up. One horned wolf jumped out right at him, catching him off guard. A girl from the team saved him with a fire shot. The next minute, the animal flew away, letting out an angry growl. The girl aimed the sights with precision, and one after another the animals were struck. The wolves of evil burned in a fiery fire, falling to the ground. The participants said that it was necessary to tidy up and move forward. One of the participants said that it would be even more dangerous, so there was no time to relax. Tyler was tense. He was advised to mine ore here. He thought that even with good equipment, they couldn't take out the demonic wolves in an hour. The guy stood at a distance from the team, thinking that the boss was already very close. He decided to start digging since time was running out, and finally an entrance underground appeared. Tyler went down on a rope. It was dark, but visibility was still there. He landed on the ground as he was faced with the red eyes of a wolf. The guy didn't have time to gasp before the monster bared its fangs and rushed at him. Having barely managed to dodge under the wolf and cut its belly, he still received a cut from the beast's claws. The wolf turned around and decided to attack again. Then Tyler decided it was time to use the bait in the form of a horned rabbit. Well, what horned wolf can resist a horned rabbit? In the blink of an eye, the predator turned into a submissive puppy begging for a treat. Having thrown out the bait, Tyler realized that living in a dungeon with armored wolves, food was rather scarce. And now the chance came to cut down the wolf. His weak spot is his stomach. The young man deftly hit him on the belly with a shovel. For the armored wolf, he received 100 experience points, not bad. In addition to experience, he received a magic crystal, deciding that he needed to stay here. At that moment, a huge she-wolf and wolf cubs appeared next to the guy. Damn it! He forgot that the smell of the rabbit would attract other wolves and rushed up the rope. Shouting bye-bye, Tyler flew up the rope, glad that these creatures couldn't climb ropes. Once he was safe and looked down, he discovered that for some reason all the wolves had run away. He realized that the wolves were running towards the guys. Tyler was of course ashamed, but they had survived the attack of the boss rabbit, which meant they wouldn't get lost here either. A young man with glasses and a mohawk on his head pulled a magic arrow, aiming at the predators. Having shot the predator, he turned to the leader of the group, saying that something was wrong with this dungeon. Why are there so many enemies here? Before he could finish, an armored wolf attacked him, shooting him in the eye. The monster clenched his jaw on his hand, the arrow still sticking out of his eye. "What the hell? The wolves are going berserk!" The group leader shouted for everyone to calm down. He yelled at a guy in a priest's robe named Eden to heal Ryan, the boy who had been attacked by the wolf. Shaking with nervousness, Eden performed magic over his friend's hand, saying that they were cursed, having just been discharged from the hospital after the rabbit attack. At this time, their partner in a witch costume, whose name was Sarah, was preparing fireballs. She set her mind to do the impossible in this E-level dungeon, and a beam of fire flew towards the beasts. Some of them were driven back, but there were too many of them. We had to save ourselves. The beasts surrounded him from all sides, growling viciously, but the leader hesitated. He took the brunt of the blow himself. The witch girl stood a little further away. When the predator attacked him, he shouted that everyone was retreating, realizing that they could not be defeated. He shouted to cover Sarah while she prepared to strike with the magic ball. A huge monster loomed over them, and the steel wolves surrounded them. The situation was more than dire. The animals were strong, and there were many of them. Eden held the book with the crucifix forward and wailed, trembling with horror, that they were doomed. Ryan pointed at the huge wolf and asked if this was the leader of the second floor's demonic wolves. Tyler swung his shovel, pleased with how he had dodged the beasts. The boss's room is right below him. We still need to see how those four are doing. They'll probably cope without him, but it would be bad if they died. And he decided to go to them, especially since he had already abandoned them once, one might say, leaving them alone with mortal danger. When the boy approached the end of the tunnel, he saw a sad picture. 4 guys huddled together and wolves surrounded them. Tyler realized that they needed to distract the Lord of the Demon Wolves and they could deal with the rest. But before he could do anything, a bright light came on, blinding the guy. Some kind of searchlight beams flooded the entire dungeon with light. Nothing could be seen. It turned out that the group leader had activated a level D artifact, the fiery dagger of the salamander's madness. Artifacts like this are rare, drop from bosses, are one-time use and disappear after use. Ryan muttered that they had been storing this artifact for half a year, and Eden added that if people found out that they had used a D-level artifact in an E-level dungeon, they would be laughed at. Tyler was happy when he saw this picture. They did it, they didn't need help. They could sell this artifact for a lot of money. Apparently, they are the first group to use such a strong artifact in a low-level dungeon. Opening the notification, he realized that he had half an hour left and it was time to speed up. Jumping down, he found himself in the dungeon in the boss's room. Next to the boss, sitting in a chair, lay a 2-headed wolf dog. The boss himself was called the half-beastman Luca, and his weapon was a huge axe. To enhance the research experience, Tyler introduced many hidden secrets into the new fantasy world. In the Wolf Demon Dungeon, to open one of these secrets, you need to reach the boss room without killing monsters. Tyler had just dug a passage into the boss's room without waking anyone. Opening the panel, he began to look for a roast pig. A roast pig appeared, which was supposed to literally put the bosses to sleep. Having also selected sleeping pills and sleeping mushrooms from the panel, he carefully watered the pig. The sleeping pig is ready, it's time to act. Tyler took the dish and went to the monster. He approached with slow steps so as not to wake the dog, carefully placing the piglet down. As soon as I put it down, he immediately started running, and upon smelling the smell, the monster immediately opened his eyes. The 2-headed wolf jumped up, rotating its white pupils, but immediately stopped, having caught the scent. 2 heads looked at the delicious piglet. The deed was done. Growling and salivating, the monster rushed to devour the pig and was never seen or heard again. The 2 heads began to fight each other with furious screams. Tyler should have waited until it was over. He thought that if he had known they were going to fight like that, he would have brought more food. While the 2 heads were fighting, our hero was trying to make sure that this stupid wolf didn't wake up his master. Finally, the monster passed out. Now we can act. Physically, the Beastman is weaker than the Wolf Demon, and is only strong thanks to his axe weapon with the tornado dance skill. Tyler reached out to grab the rather large weapon, just as he had intended. "Ah!" the guy shouted. "To take the boss's weapon, you need to be level 25. Why did he add this requirement?" At that moment, he was terribly angry with himself, so what to do now? At that moment, the boss woke up, quickly opened his inventory, and took the axe. The boss was clearly determined to crush him like a cockroach. Raising both hands, he knocked them over with all his might. Tyler barely managed to jump back. The attack power was very high. If he tried to reflect it, he would lose a lot of life HP energy. Tyler thought, when will the big guy stop to rest for even a second? He needed to dodge and eat the hare's head to increase his speed. The berserk rabbit hunting skill has been activated. That's enough running away. After having a snack, he saw that a mission to change the profession of the demon race had been launched. Taking a shovel in each hand, the boy decided to repel the Beastman's attacks with a determined look. For a while, the boss even stopped short of such a change of course. After this, with decisive movements and renewed vigor, he went on the attack. The 2-headed wolf slept soundly, drugged by the sleepy dish, Tyler with 2 shovels and the boss in front of him. The boss picked up speed and aimed his fist at the guy, who managed to put a shovel under it. It was extremely difficult to withstand such a blow. Tyler threw the shovel forward with all his might. The boss's life energy dropped slightly, but this did not affect his attacks. Yes, the damage to him is like a mosquito bite, Tyler thought. To defeat him, he would need to hit the Beastman 200 times like this. When you go through the Beastman Luke in a group, he is not particularly difficult. He just needs to be provoked and distracted while others attack. But here he is alone and there is no one who could provoke him. Tyler clearly underestimated him. Another powerful blow came. The guy thought that he would not be able to withstand such force and even dodge it at such speed. Falling onto the rocks, Tyler noted that Luca had developed a throwing skill that he had not programmed for him, and it seemed that he had also changed and was no longer the boss he knew. At this time, the beastman approached his sweetly sleeping dog and grabbed him by the huge chain to which he was tied. "What's going on? Why doesn't he continue to attack?" the surprised guy noted. The boss lashed out at his pet's sleeping heads with all his might, and Tyler noted that he was too cunning for a boss. While he was busy with the wolf, the guy opened the panel and decided to fight him one-on-one. "We can't let him wake up the two-headed monster, but how to defeat him? Even if he puts all the remaining points into his strength, it won't help him. He needs to think about how to survive here. What if we take a risk and invest everything into dexterity, so we will be and press activation?" Tyler currently had the highest mobility among level 10 players. He ran like lightning at the boss, who didn't have time to come to his senses before Tyler hit him with a shovel, causing him to lose energy. The beastman tried to grab the guy, but he deftly managed to dodge. Tyler jumped up and pretended to want to attack, performing feints. These maneuvers were necessary so that he could grab the torches. He also has a demon eye function, which means he can see better than the boss in the dark. The boss stood still. He was shocked. It was time to act. The monster's hand and the shovel collided. It turns out the thug can feel it. He had a weak spot in his neck, and Tyler decided to attack it, but getting to it was not easy. The beastman, his eyes flashing, rushed at Tyler, who managed to run away. Tyler pretended to run nearby and ran away. The boss started turning his head looking for him. Then the guy stuck a shovel into the kneecap, which was a vulnerable spot, thereby reducing the speed of the monster, and hit it in the eye, which reduced Luca's vision. He growled and tried to get up. Our hero thought about how effective stealth attacks were in the dark. Continuing to attack, Tyler ran forward to prevent the boss from restoring energy. He kept his items ready, trying to find the right place to strike again. The boss growled as he tried to lift a huge chain from the ground, his poor eyesight and slowness hindering him. He was able to lift the chain, and with one swing he cut through something like lightning. The beastman, rattling his chain, began a massive attack trying to catch up with Tyler. The chain hit the guy and he fell on his back. Blood spurted out. It was painful. It hurt so much, Tyler winced in pain. If he didn't recover now, he would lose a lot of his life force. He took out a bottle of life energy from his inventory when he saw the beastman rushing towards him. A notification came that Luca had gained the ability to adapt to the dark, and he also didn't give Tyler a chance to recover. If only he had a healer, he would have fought him calmly. But his strength began to recover, and it was time to continue the fight. He managed to hit the beastman in the face in a jump. Blood spurted. The monster screamed and tried to grab the guy with his hand. Another blow, and the enemy staggered and flew onto his back, the charge of energy falling. What a horrified notification comes that the beastman Luke has activated the berserker skill. He looked at Tyler with one red eye flashing, steam billowing from his nostrils with rage. Flashing with power, he drove the guy, and a message was received that player Tyler was captured. Another second and a giant fist sweeps away our hero. The dodge function is impossible. The tool cannot be used. The shovel was destroyed. Tyler flies into a brick wall at high speed. A red signal from the system that critical damage has been inflicted. The pain is paralyzing and doesn't allow him to move. It's dripping from his mouth. If the boss hits him again, he definitely won't survive. The boss tries to crush the guy with his hands clasped together, but he rolls away at the last moment. Opening his inventory, he says that it's not just you who can go berserk. I'll do it too now. Activating the mission to change the demon race's profession is his trump card. Tyler began to transform, his body feeling like it was being torn apart from the inside. In 29 seconds, he turned into a demon, gaining new power. After the transformation, all his characteristics increased by 20. He was filled with strength and energy. In such a state, he would defeat even a level 30 player. Luca was now in a berserk state, but you could still feel his fear. Before his eyes, the skinny boy became big, strong, and angry, ready to take on any challenge. Half moaning, the beastman picked up a huge boulder, while Tyler rose up, cutting through everything around him. Smiling, he easily stopped the flying monolith and held it in his hand like a rubber ball. Then he turned to the monster and said that he was going to beat the crap out of him. Flying up to him, he imagined his crushing blow knocking down the boss. Another throw and the beast man quickly loses his vitality, then another blow. Tyler was really strong in this state, but the duration of this transformation was only 30 seconds. If during this time he cannot defeat the boss, then everything will soon return to normal. On the first floor of the Wolf Demon dungeon, there were 4 players lying, tired and exhausted. Ryan exhaled, saying that they finally won, but he was devastated. Sarah looked at her wand and said that it would break soon. Suddenly, they jumped up hearing sounds. It seemed like 2 monsters were fighting underneath them. They received a message that the Beastman boss Luca was killed. They cleared the dungeon, how they could clear the dungeons, and when they managed to destroy the boss. Tyler was exhausted and recovering. The system was giving congratulations on the victory and crystals appeared. He activated the inventory. It was interesting what he got. It was some strange item, a necklace. The guy smiled happily, like many magic crystals, and some perfect blue crystal. Crystals are divided into normal, pure, and ideal. This crystal is very expensive, valued as 100 simple ones. Tyler looked at the rare bonus, the stone glowing sky blue. He was already imagining how many different dishes they would order with Mendy. The girl will be so happy and will say how she loves her dad more than anyone else. Tyler thought he needed to find someone to make a powerful weapon, even though he was used to shovels. And this object, he looked at the necklace. It is impossible to recognize. It seems to have been added by the game. Tyler, sitting next to the boss's corpse, heard footsteps and the sound of doors opening. The 2-headed wolf lay on its back, still asleep, bound by a golden chain. Tyler hurried to leave. As soon as the door to the boss's dungeon opened, the wolf would rush through. The wolf had already begun to rise. Now no sleeping pill would help. And what idiot designed this? Well, of course it was him. He hurried up, he killed the boss, and let the guys deal with the wolf. The boys opened the stone door, very carefully walking inside. Everyone was surprised by what they saw. Ryan was puzzled, noticing how the boss could have died if the door was not open. Looking at the carcass of the dead beast man, they could not stop being amazed by the mysterious dungeon. A 2-headed wolf was looking at them with an angry growl. Ryan assumed that maybe he had betrayed and killed the boss. They killed the beastman's grinning pet, noticing that not only was this a strange dungeon, but it was also insane. Ryan, lying on the floor, recovering his strength, complained that this land was causing nothing but losses. They even lost an artifact. Only junk items, low-rank crystals, not even good weapons dropped. Their leader received a notification about clearing the dungeon. Do they want the system to announce and name them? He exchanged glances with Sarah, and they could tell from each other's eyes that they didn't want this. They were asked to establish a name for their group. The leader suggested calling their squad Salamander. At this time, everyone already knew that the dungeon had been cleared of wolves at a record speed, and all members of the group had received the title of wolf hunters. Everyone was discussing this news. No one had dealt with it so quickly. They were clearly using artifacts. The guys saw the message. They are now celebrities, which means they can join a good guild. They found Tyler, saying that this title gives an attribute buff. This miner got a lot from the dungeon. They looked at Tyler standing and the white crystals lying in front of him. Ryan yelled that he had been digging for so long and had only gotten this. Tyler scratched his head and made excuses that his shovels were dull. The team was disappointed, especially Ryan, who was outraged by such a blockhead in the team. It wouldn't even pay for the potion they spent. He said that since Tyler got the title for free, they would take everything he had dug up and went to the exit. Only Sarah felt sorry for him. When the others went ahead, she handed the guy his share. Tyler thanked her and decided that since he had the opportunity, he could approach her and ask for her name and phone number. The girl tried to pull her hat down lower. She blushed and blurted out that her name was Sarah. She gave him her phone number. Tyler added it to his phone contacts. Sarah hurried him towards the exit, as the dungeon would soon close. A crowd of people were waiting for the heroes to come out, and when they come out, they must be collecting bonuses. The entrance began to open and a roar ran through it, indicating that they were coming out. Everyone rushed to them. Some offered to join their guild, others asked to tell the secrets of clearing the dungeon, and others tried to find out what artifacts had fallen out, offering to buy them profitably. Tyler pulled his hood up and quickly blended into the crowd. He didn't like large crowds. He hurried to leave as quickly as possible. He didn't like being surrounded by a crowd. He walked, but it seemed as if several eyes were drilling into his back. There was a feeling of being followed. He stopped and looked around. There was no one, only bushes and trees. He completed the mission and can now change his profession. He couldn't decide whether to choose the demon warrior who has high strength, defense, and intelligence, and a body like armor. The demon hunter has good dexterity, strength, and attack indicators. They are extremely mobile. The demon sorcerer has a strong soul and specializes in healing spells and can summon ghosts and skeletons. He is a Libra according to his horoscope, so it is difficult to choose. Each of the demons has unique qualities for battle. He needs the goddess to get his hero certificate. But he needs to hold off on summoning her for now. She's already angry at him because of the rabbits. He decided to put everything into agility and chose the demon hunter. The notification showed that the profession had changed and the player's property had been modified. The skill hunter's mark has been acquired. The demon hunter can mark the target. While the mark is active, the demon hunter knows the location of the target, thus the damage to the target will be doubled. This skill will be useful to him both in duels and in solo dungeon clearing. At this time, Bianca reported to the Oversight Association that the Artists Guild had a major battle with the Dark Elves. 40 players had died. The guild was counting the missing, and one of the leaders had also died. The Artists Guild is made up of professionals. This guild is under the jurisdiction of the military. They rarely fight in dungeons, preferring the front lines. What happened is alarming. Sheldon sighed and asked how many people already knew about this. Bianca reported that in order to avoid panic and chaos, information about this incident was hidden. Sheldon also learned that the higher-ups had made a request to provide other players to the front lines for support. On the outskirts of the pasture, a familiar crew was moving, engaged in transporting players. Seeing the request to stop, the cab driver stopped. Tyler climbed into the cart and finally his phone started to pick up a signal. Several angry messages came from Eileen, who was outraged by his ignoring. The messages accused him of being an irresponsible weakling. Mendy was in the hospital, and he didn't care. The girl lay in a hospital room with a bandage on her head, while Eileen was peeling an apple next to her. Mendy had a high fever. Her face was red, and she was breathing heavily. Tyler, dirty and in tattered clothes, burst into the room saying, "Like Mendy." Eileen hissed at him to stop yelling. The girl had just fallen asleep. Then, in her usual style, she went to scold him about where he had disappeared to for 2 days, not knowing that the child had a high temperature. Tyler replied that he had earned money. After these words, Eileen beamed and asked whether he had really managed to earn money, and not like the previous times. Tyler assured her that this time everything was okay. Now he could pay for the rent and medical expenses, as well as for the water leak and for Mendy's broken TV. Eileen looked at him with respect for the first time, noticing that for so many years she had only seen his failures. The guy handed the owner of the apartment 4 expensive crystals, saying that she could sell them. It should be enough for everything. Eileen was amazed to see these expensive victory items. She asked him if he had gone to the dungeon. Tyler replied that he was going to become a sharer. At this time, a nurse looked through the door and asked which of them was a member of the child's family. The doctor wanted to talk. Tyler and Eileen shouted in unison. They felt awkward after this and turned their heads towards each other. Tyler opened the door and looked at the girl and said that he would go. The doctor was surprised to see such a young father when the boy introduced himself. With a heavy sigh, the doctor handed Tyler the test, accompanied by words for him to be strong. The guy turned white after reading the diagnosis of magic element syndrome. If earlier cancer was the most terrible diagnosis of humanity, then after computer generation in reality, the syndrome of magical elements became a new nightmare. After the game broke out into the real world, the air began to consist of not only oxygen, nitrogen, and other things, but also from the particles called the magical element. It does not affect most people, but some turned out to be vulnerable. Their bodies absorb the magical element from the air, which remains in their bodies, causing negative effects such as high fever, or when a person cannot fall asleep or, on the contrary, constantly wants to sleep. Some people completely lose their appetite and feel nauseous after eating any food. Black spots on the body and other reactions may appear. The doctor said sadly that modern medicine cannot cure this, only support the body as much as possible. He added that this baby had the heaviest dose of those who were hospitalized, so even such treatment would not be effective. Tyler walked out into the hallway on wobbly legs and sat down on a bench, tears of pain and despair welling up. He thought that he couldn't just give up. He had one more chance, but for now he could only go to the burial ground in the hope that Lasso's tears would fall. This is a rare item that drops in the game that can cure any disease. But this item can only drop from a burial ground saturated with death. If you can't form a group, then there's nothing left to do but go into the dungeon alone, which is impossible for regular players. But he is no longer the weakling who could previously only defeat a horned rabbit. Back in the room, Tyler tried to look as calm as possible. Eileen asked what the doctor said. "What's wrong with Mendy?" Tyler lied that it was a common cold, but the money he gave was not enough and he had to pay more. Eileen screamed that this hospital was dishonest. They only paid that amount in the morning. How could it end in less than a day? After saying that if there wasn't enough money, he didn't have to pay rent for now, the guy hugged her and called her the best little sister. The girl pushed him away, saying that she was doing this for Mendy, not for him, and that he should go wash himself while she stayed with the girl. Tyler sheepishly explained that he had been fighting with the boss, which is why all his clothes were torn. Standing under the streams of water that flowed onto his wounded body, the boy noted that after he became part of the demon race, his body changed. A strong desire to destroy appeared. He may only be level 13, but his stats are way ahead of level 20 players. With his Hunter's Mark skill, he can clear dungeons alone, but it can be very difficult to go through ranked dungeons alone, so he needs to upgrade his combat abilities. After changing clothes, Tyler went to Channel Street, where players bought and sold weapons. As he passed, he heard a young man offering a dog to a lady, assuring her of its friendliness. The unicorn dog lay in the cage, whining sadly. The guy with the smiling salesman demonstrated and praised the goods. In order to activate the dog, you need to press this button on the remote control. The seller pressed it and the dog jumped up in a furious growl, after which the dog was knocked out and smoke came from the collar that controlled him. As Tyler walked further, he heard the seller add that the dog's fangs had been pulled out so that he wouldn't bite, and the woman agreed to buy it. Our hero noted with sadness that the land is no longer what it was before, but the people are still the same. He entered the magic crystal exchange shop. There were other people in the room. People looked at the rate on the board and complained that today the exchange rate fell again, and every day they get cheaper. What's the point of raiding dungeons if they'll soon become worthless? Eiler opened his inventory. He handed the crystals to the girl behind the counter, and she named the exchange rate for Irang crystals for today. He agreed, clicking on the virtual inventory panel, saying that there was more. Holding out the purest shining crystal, he simply asked how much it cost. The girl could not take her eyes off the shining stone. It was lit with such a bright light. Then, taking a magnifying glass, she carefully assessed its purity and declared that it was a D-rank ideal magic crystal, from which one could make a wonderful weapon, but if he wanted to sell it, then their store would be happy to buy it, and named the price. Tyler thought that now the level of the players is lower, and the crystals are valued less and less. 6 months ago, there would have been a battle for it. The guy saw how the player behind him was looking greedily at the shining crystals. Having sold the crystals at the price offered by the store, the deal was completed. The girl immediately transferred money to Tyler's account, where the tax was automatically deducted. Tyler then headed to the gun store. He was offered several types of weapons, a long sword and a water dagger. The guy snorted. What kind of store is not a single elite gun? In fact, the prices were high and he couldn't afford them. A guy in a hoodie was selling weapons right from the ground on the street. Tyler saw 2 swords, a large one and a smaller one, shimmering with a pinkish lilac color. The guy took 2 in his hands. This is the sword of Baldor's curse, capable of absorbing the souls of the dead, thereby increasing his attack. It can't be, Tyler thought, dumbfounded. This sword has 3 effects. It once belonged to the god of light. The seller warned Tyler not to get too excited. This weapon is not for people. The guy was jubilant. He wanted to dance. He was not a human being, but he couldn't show his delight, so that he wouldn't raise the price. Tyler decided to find out the price. When the seller named the amount of $15,000, he was indignant. Wasn't it expensive? But the seller snapped that this was a B-rank item. He wasn't satisfied. Let him get lost. Tyler showed the axe he got in the dungeon in his inventory and offered to trade it. The seller took it in his hands, assessed it. The item was rare and he liked it. Tyler walked and thought what a great day. Everything went so well with the exchange. And the seller, smiling slyly, thought that he had fooled such a simpleton. The guy understood that if the seller found out that he was not human, he would squeeze all the juices out of him for this sword. The seller grinned, realizing that Tyler had money, but this axe was also very good. Tyler walked into the hospital room. Mandy and Eileen were sleeping. He looked at them, not daring to wake them up. He walked up to Eileen and carefully tucked her in as she slept next to his adopted daughter's bed. Tyler went out and went to the nurse's station. The girl politely asked how she could help him. Tyler responded that he wanted to upgrade room 27 to a VIP room. The nurse was surprised, but quickly came to her senses and said that everything would be done. Eileen woke up. Mandy was still sleeping. She heard the sounds of notifications coming to her phone. The messages showed the amount that had come from Tyler, covering medical expenses for him, for Mandy, for TV repairs, and 5 months of rent owed. The guy said that he would be gone for a couple of days. Would she be able to look after Mandy? The girl thought sadly. What a liar he was. The girl had problems. Because of a common cold, they don't book a VIP room. Tyler arrived at the Great Rift Valley, which was 100 kilometers from the city and 120 from the skyline tree. Here, technology has no power anyway, so you still have to walk another 30 kilometers. Fortunately, after he became a demon and his strength increased, walking 30 kilometers was nothing for him. Tyler looked at the map and remembered his design. The burial ground should be hidden in the deepest part of the foggy forest. Before the dungeon can be opened, a mission map is needed to indicate the location. This mission needs to be taken in the village of Darren. It is a neutral village where high-ranking players have gathered. It is an important resource base. The players stood at the entrance to the wooden house. There was a buzz and tension. Inside sat a drunk guy who could barely move his tongue and told 2 players waiting for a mission to bring him a pretty girl. The guys looked with disgust at this drunkard who had vomited from drinking too much. The guy was yelling that this drunk had been tricking them into giving him drinks and food for days without giving him any equipment when Tyler walked in. The guys started warning the guy that this alcoholic was ripping people off for food and drink. The drunkard voiced his demands regarding the cute girl to Tyler as well. The deceived player tried to reason with Tyler not to trust him if he didn't want to become just as unhappy and deceived. Our hero resolutely held out a magazine with a photo on the cover in front of the drunkard's eyes. Tyler winked, showing off the girl's luscious curves on the cover. He beamed with happiness as he leafed through the magazine, unable to hide his admiration. The deceived player opened his mouth in surprise, but what could have been done was simply give him a magazine with girls. Tyler showed 3 more magazines with cute girls, mysteriously saying that he has many more like them. The drunkard sobered up from the pictures of the girls, greedily grabbed the magazines and ordered them to bring him some wine for a good job. Tyler held out his hand with a bottle of liquor, saying that was no problem either. The deceived player widened his eyes even more, shouting that it was an expensive bottle and that he had brought it on this mission. The person in charge of the mission took a sip from the bottle, saying that the taste was quite good. Having had his fill of the new portion, he smiled contentedly and said that the wine was really not bad. Then he noted that since the guy was so sincere, let him write a frontal letter to his neighbor Julia, and then he would decide whether to issue the mission or not. At this point, Tyler clenched his fist. He really wanted to punch, but he told himself that he needed to control his anger. Taking a piece of paper and a pen, I quickly wrote a love letter to a certain Julia. The deceived player could not come to his senses looking at Tyler. He was delighted with his talent. The next task was to deliver a letter to this same Julia. Tyler ran away with a swollen cheek from the fist of Julia's husband, who was yelling with a knife that if anyone else helps that alcoholic, he will cut off their legs. Julia's husband was obviously not surprised by another mailman, Tyler thought. What kind of idiot came up with this mission? This stupid mission was created by this same game designer who was running away from an angry man with a knife, who was taken out with love messages to his wife. The mission giver was sitting in the lotus position when Tyler returned and said with a serious expression that he had noticed Tyler's sincerity. So he has a task for the guy. Everyone present in the line gasped. Did anyone really get the task? We need to return to the burial ground the remains of the son of this drunkard, who in his youth went in search of adventure and never returned. Tyler received a map of how to get there and a bell to use if danger appears. Our hero had barely left when people began vying with each other to offer him their services. A level 47 archer ran up offering to complete the quest together. Tyler thanked everyone but explained that he had to go through this mission alone. As he left the location at the top of the wooden house, black figures were watching him. One of the group, dressed in robes, hiding their faces, said that as soon as the boy left the village, the assignment and equipment would be with them. They followed Tyler like a shadow. He was their target. Tyler was running. He had to hurry. The secret pursuers were already on the ground. The girl pointed her finger at him and told the man standing next to her that this guy had received a mission of historical rank. She was very curious, and she persuaded the man to follow Tyler to find out what mission he had received. The girl ran up to one of those standing in robes and asked what they wanted to do. He glanced at her and said that she was so cute. Then he put his hand on the girl's shoulder. The man who was with the girl came up and said not to take her words seriously. She was still a child. At this time, the girl began to say why these guys were so angry. The uncle slapped her on the head, telling her not to interfere when adults were talking. The girl whined that if he continued to hit her on the head like that, she would not grow up. The group in robes began to walk away so as not to lose track of Tyler. When they left, the man told his young friend to avoid these people next time. The girl asked why he was so polite to these people despite the fact that he had such a high level. He sighed and said that it was impossible to protect oneself from a poisonous snake, since she was still a newbie in this area. Deal with them. The man replied that for these places it was normal for several people to die, but they couldn't install video surveillance here, so it was impossible to check what was going on. The girl said in fear that then this boy was in danger, since they were pursuing him. The man noted that he deserved it, since he was so smug and self-confident that he was going on such a mission alone and not with the guild. Tyler walked to the entrance of the misty forest. He felt shadows behind him and thought about those very poisonous snakes. He walked with his eyes sideways, figuring that they would want to attack as soon as he entered the forest. Tyler looked at the thick fog, realizing that it was difficult to see anything in such visibility. One of the pursuers drew an arrow from his bow, intending to shoot the boy. Tyler broke out in a cold sweat as the arrow flew past his ear. Looking around, he saw people in robes surrounding him. He hid behind a thick tree, counting 4 people following him. One of the gang with a cane in the shape of a snake teased the archer that it wouldn't hurt for him to practice shooting. He activated his cane. The snake's eyes lit up. The participant told everyone that he was going to crush this boy into dust. Tongues of flame appeared and grew larger and larger. Tyler looked around tensely, wondering what he should do now. When the flames began to reach the place where he was standing, he decided that he had to act. With all his might, he jumped up, scorched by the heat, and jumped up, running away from the fire. How did they find him? Tyler thought as he ran away. The pursuers saw how the boy dodged the fire at the last moment. The archer laughed, reproaching the arsonist, and laughed even more. He himself missed. Tyler ran at top speed without looking back, putting in all his strength. Suddenly he stopped, not knowing why, but his instinct told him to do so. The boy remembered that he had a demon instinct and he sensed danger. At that moment, all his muscles tensed up as suddenly one of the snake gang flew at him from above. Tyler held his blade out, holding it with both hands against his opponent's blade. The attacker told his allies that this boy was able to see him, even though he became invisible. The guy could be an assassin. Tyler had no intention of running away. He held back his attacker with all his might. The remaining 3 awaited the result, ordering them to attack the guy until he was destroyed. The archer began to draw his bow, intending to shoot Tyler. He released a shower of arrows that were supposed to cover the guy in a pillar of fire. Tyler heard a noise, looked up and saw a fireball. At first he didn't understand what it was. Then he saw a fountain of fiery arrows coming from the sky. Our hero tried to dodge, realizing that the Rangers were blocking his movement in this way. Tyler ducked and sped through the barrage of arrows, his life force draining. While running away, the guy opened his inventory, thinking that these 4 had apparently been together for a long time, since they acted in a coordinated manner. He found what he needed, and a victorious smile lit up his face. He saw a huge tree, stopped looking at it, and here in his new world programming there was a glitch. He heard a voice that stopped him. "You're running well." Tyler looked at the speaker with a smile and replied that if a bunch of idiots hadn't been chasing him, he wouldn't have run away at all. The shooter didn't like such impudence. He pulled the arrow and pinched Tyler that he was a corpse. While playing, the boy easily dodged a flying arrow. He activated the agility skill. The arrows flew one after another, but the guy wriggled without making much effort. At this time, the field boss, the bloodthirsty demon tree, was activated. The boy jumped from branch to branch, which tried to push him into the tree's mouth. The pursuers, observing the situation, were surprised why the boss was present. The shooter screamed in horror, calling for someone to save him from the bloodthirsty monster he didn't expect to see. The tree moved around the screaming shooter, but no one rushed to help him. They looked at their friend and talked about how to defeat the level 42 boss. The second added that it looked like they had fallen into a trap. The bloodthirsty tree monster was already reaching out with its branches to the shooter, who was calling his friends for help. The snake-shaped wand controller activated it, and a stream of hellish flame burst out. The shooter flew back, his eyes and mouth open in horror. The tree pierced the shooter with its branches. He screamed, "Why was this happening to him? Why?" The manager of the Gelum explained to those standing nearby that the boss's rage would disappear from you after death. And now the boss will switch to the one who is closest to the dead man, that is, the guy. This way they don't have to fight the boss, while their comrade is reduced to a skeleton with all the flesh squeezed out of him. The trio began to leave. Tyler looked at them, thinking that they wanted to escape. As expected from poisonous snakes, they bit one of their own as soon as they were in danger. One of the remaining three said that something strange was happening. A minute later, he was screaming in horror that the boss had turned his attention to him and not the boy. The tree directed its deadly branches at them with great speed. When one of those who came to his senses was pulled by the tree's branches, he asked the leader to save him. He tripped over the foot of a tree, realizing that he was finished. Another of the remaining group, who had the power of invisibility, chuckled and said that he would just leave. The second of the group was pierced through by the tree and pulled through the air. A minute later, all that was left of him was a mummified skeleton, the tree having sucked out all the flesh. The one holding the snake-shaped staff was hysterical on the ground, screaming that they were all doomed. At this time, their leader was discussing how the forest boss acts. He attacks those who run away, and not just those who are nearby. He looked at what was happening and calmly made calculations in his head. It dawned on him that the boss's attacks didn't depend on aggro, but on movement. The boss must be using waves to find the target. If you stand still, he won't attack. The boss doesn't attack the guy because he knew the settings and attack styles of the forest monster. One of the remaining ones ran screaming. The tree began to move, picking up the vibrations. The faster he ran, the faster the tree sped up. The leader, calling him a moron, yelled at him not to run, then the boss wouldn't attack. The guy heard and stopped. The tree stopped behind him, too. The leader ordered to use the fiery snake and attack the boy. Tyler stood quietly near the tree and watched them. Grabbing the staff, the pursuer activated it, igniting a flame of fire and directed it at Tyler. The streams of fire again attacked the guy, who successfully dodged them. Again and again he released fire from his staff, which filled the tree. Tyler successfully dodged time after time using his abilities. Once again, dropping fire closer and closer to the tree, the dealer dodged, and the fire hit the boss. The pursuer shouted that he cannot touch the forest monster. His eyes widened in horror, realizing that he was about to get a backlash from the forest boss. The flames of the fire shot up and a howl like a groan was heard. The two remaining members of the Snake Union watched as Tyler dodged, and the tree did not touch him. The one who wielded the staff asked why. He muttered that he himself did not understand. The guy hid and watched as they walked away. They were not only strong, but also smart, since they understood how the boss behaved in such a short time. The guy selected an arrow and a bow from his inventory, deciding that there was no need to hesitate against poisonous snakes. He looked out and pulled the bowstring of an arrow towards the two men in robes. Tyler fired, and the arrow flew past the wielder of the staff, who was stunned by surprise. The next second, he activated his staff and sent a fiery flame at Tyler in anger. The leader yelled at him, calling him a blockhead, and the boy deliberately provoked the attack. As a result, the fiery flame touched the boss. The tree moved and howled. The guy with the staff screamed, realizing that the ball had hit the boss, expecting a not very pleasant return blow. Tyler took aim and fired 3 arrows at once into the group of his pursuers. The wielder of the staff parried the blow with his sword. The leader was furious and yelled at Tyler, "Stop being so cocky, you bastard!" Flashing lightning in all directions, he flew at the guy, screaming that he would now feel the difference between them. The other one with a sword looked at the boss, figuring out where his safe place was, which the boy knew, where the boss would not attack. He growled in anger, hoping that the leader would finish off this brat who was the reason they were in such trouble. The leader yelled that Tyler shouldn't think that hiding behind the boss would save his life. Our hero watched in alarm as his pursuer fought the boss and thought that he was strong to fight on par with the monster. The leader has entered a state of berserk. It lasts for 5 minutes, during which time the player receives additional bonuses to all attributes. With wild eyes, waving his sword, he rushed at Tyler, shouting that he was dead. Tyler came out from behind the branch, thinking that the forest monster was far from a weak boss, even stronger than many of the dungeon ones. Suddenly it dawned on Tyler how this guy, fighting such a strong boss, had such confidence that he could kill Tyler. That's right. He had an artifact that he held in his hand in the form of a glowing sphere. The sphere shimmered with orange flames of fire. This artifact dealt explosive damage. The leader swung and threw the sphere at Tyler, wishing him death. Tyler thought in horror, "What a madman! This is a suicide artifact!" The village watched the explosion, talking about which rich man had used such a high-ranking artifact. A couple of million wasted. At the entrance to the misty forest, the girl player and the man were staggered by the explosion. The girl, looking at the lying body in fear, asked if the man was dead. The man grabbed his companion by the hand and said that they needed to run. It was very dangerous here. They could also get caught in the flames. At this time, one of the Snake Four was lying in torn clothes and crystals appeared around him. Tyler sat on the scorched ruins and drank to quench his thirst and restore his strength. He thought that if he had not managed to escape, he too would have died from a suicidal explosion. Looking at the burnt roots of the boss, he thought that the power of the artifact was terrible. The body of the boss had completely disappeared. It's a good thing that the guy from these poisonous snakes left his friend to die before throwing away the artifact. The contents of the inventory fell out of the deceased. Tyler noted that if they had used this artifact at the very beginning, he could have definitely died. Standing over the corpse, Tyler said, "This guy must be very rich. Look how many magic crystals there are." When suddenly the hand of the guy lying down twitched. The guy looked and understood that everything was not as he saw it. The next second, he jumped away from the leader who had attacked him. He was clearly surprised when he asked the question, as Tyler noticed. Our hero chuckled and replied that he thought he was a complete idiot when a player died, and his items fell out neatly instead of scattering around. What? He bet on greed? While he was collecting items, was going to attack? The big guy burst out laughing, noticing that the guy was no slouch and had seen apparently more than they did. Calling him an even more poisonous snake than they are, Tyler thought to himself. How could I not know? I am the developer of this game. In turn, the guy asked the leader how he survived the suicidal explosion. Flexing his muscles, the big guy chuckled and said, since the boy was going to die soon anyway, he would tell. He has a unique equipment that allows him to use 2 artifacts at the same time, so he used the dragon's roar and protection from it at the same time. He then noted that all of this cost more than $1 billion. He planned to spend it on the artists of the goddess's art, but not on Tyler. Pointing his finger at the guy, he asked why the boss didn't attack him. Then the guy crossed 2 swords in front of his chest and responded, not attacking because they were of the same race of demons. The big guy laughed heartily, saying, "Enough lying, what a joke!" Then his eyes lit up red. His face took on the expression of a predator, and he said, "It doesn't matter. You're a corpse. I'll recognize you from a corpse." Tyler in turn grinned, preparing for another fight. The guy activated the hunting mark, aiming the sight at the enemy. He must have also lost a lot of strength in the fight because he survived a serious attack. While Tyler was scanning the big guy, he was in a frantic rage, which is why he felt like a predator was targeting him. The next moment, he felt an incredible strength. Could this boy really be stronger than him? But he wasn't even level 20. The guy turned into a demon appeared before him and said cheerfully that it was time to end this. A couple of blows and the dying hunter wheezed out what he was, then croaked that he was like those artists. He was like those, no longer human. He saw Tyler in the face of a demon and was horrified by this power. He did not remember the last time he experienced such horror. A high-level enemy was killed, 19,000 XP was obtained. While changing clothes, Tyler only now thought about why he had not heard of XP for killing players before. Now, apparently, his mark can be raised even further. He wondered, so the Dark Elves increase their marks by killing players. Tyler looked through the inventory, taking stock of the items he had purchased for killing the four. He had a long metal vibrator sword, and when he picked it up, he thought that most likely only people of the Berserk class could use it. Then Tyler was shocked. He saw a magic ring, the same A-rank equipment that only drops in dungeons of level B and above. This is one of the most difficult passages, but there is no other way. He was ready. The first floor, called the Floor of Corpses, greeted our hero with darkness, mustiness, and a pile of bones. Tyler, walking down the first-floor hallway, was warned that he would pay a high price for trespassing. And then skeletons were waiting for him, ready to tear him to pieces. One was a level 27 skeleton, a level 26 spearman skeleton, and the third skeleton archer from level 28. They glared at Tyler with their sunken eye sockets and were happy to get points for killing such a brave man. The guy was overcome with panic fear, which turned into anger. This wasn't the game he had designed. There shouldn't be such high-level skeletons here. Once again, this damn system changed his code, which did not bode well. In a split second, a combat skeleton with a sword rushed at Tyler, and a loud roar and grinding sound appeared. He barely held back the dead man's onslaught, cursing where he got so much strength from. The second one flew up from behind, and the tip of the spear almost pierced the guy's back. Another pike that could cut him like butter was in front of his face. At the last second, before he was almost pierced, the guy managed to make a jump. The skeleton archer took the opportunity to draw his arrow and launch it at Tyler. He jumped back. The tension was growing. This place was too small to maneuver. Then another spear point approached his face, and the guy activated the attack. He folded his swords and jumped up. There was a crash, a flash from which our hero shook. Landing on the ground, he thought that the dungeon was even harder than he imagined. If the first floor of the burial ground is so complex, then what can we say about the rest? But everything he does for Mendy. He has to go through this dungeon. Having activated the hunter's mark, he directed it at one of the skeletons. This would, of course, be more difficult than he expected. He took aim at the skeleton archer, quickly realizing that he needed to take him out first. The skeletons didn't immediately understand what had happened when they saw a bright flash flying towards them. It was Tyler who had turned on super acceleration. Having flown past the two, he landed on the archer with lightning speed. We managed to attack the weak spot. Great. He's been knocked out. It won't take much to bring him down. The guy got 300 experience points and also absorbed the soul of a skeleton archer. These swords have a special zest. Only now he realized it. There was a second undead coming, and Tyler was low level, so he needed to level up quickly. His swords had the ability to hit the enemy when they struck a weak spot. Gathering all his strength, he jumped up. The skeleton opened his mouth, apparently not expecting such agility from a low-level person. The second one was defeated. A pile of shards lay on the floor. The guy sat down to rest. Now, having studied the attack pattern of these skulls, he knows how to act quickly. Suddenly, the bones of the slain enemy began to vibrate and became covered with a purple glow. The hunting mark flashed, and our hero tensed up. He was not alone here. Tyler stood up abruptly. Two skeletons peered out from around the corner at him with shock and trembling, apparently already aware of this player's abilities. The dead man didn't have time to do anything. The guy, with the agility of a predator, quickly moved towards him. He tied up two stunned dead men, arguing that thanks to them, others would come. The player was pleased with the work done and advised the corpses to summon more of their own kind. He already knew their attack patterns very well and could easily defeat them. Then he cackled triumphantly, asking if they had heard him. He easily turned new skeletons into broken shards. There were so many of them lying around that it was impossible to count them. And then the system began to give out information about the increase in experience several times. His player level rose to 20, and the hunting mark also increased. Tyler analyzed that considering the attributes, also the race of the demon hunter, his main characteristics are better than those of level 30 players. He remembered that big guy in the forest. Now he could easily give him a beating. While he was thinking, the poor tied-up things gave up their spirits. The system congratulated him with another post 350 experience points. Well, the guy got indignant. It turns out they died like suicides, and now he can't grind experience. He approached the exit from the first-floor burial ground. In front of him were closed gates. After standing for a while, it was time to go in and move on. When Tyler put his palm to the gates, they opened. Entering another cave, the first thing he saw was piles of lying bones. The system showed that these were the remains of a player who had been missing for a long time. So here he is. The guy walked further. The torches lit up, shedding light on what was happening in the cave. A skeleton dressed in armor looked at him sideways and chuckled to the player that it would be impossible to penetrate him. Tyler was sweating. He couldn't damage the armor. What was the best thing to do now? That's right. You need to activate the hunting mark and look at the enemy's weak spot. After scanning the skeleton, the system showed that this target had no weak points. Our hero screamed, and with his eyes widened in horror, he screamed how he had no weak spots. So standing with swords in his hands, he feverishly tried to draw up a plan for further action. Looking at the skeleton's protection, he began to understand that this was the armor of the elves of the Wicker Void tribe. Grinning, he prepared to repel all the power with which the dead man was going to attack him. Seriously frightened, the guy realized that this skeleton had a much higher level than the skeletons on the first floor. The enemy rushed at Tyler with stunning force, intending to pin him to the ground. The force of the blow was so strong that the guy flew to the ground in hellish pain. He tried to twist away in mid-flight, but slapped the stone bottom of the cave so hard that blood spurted from his mouth, and the boy screamed in pain. Opening his eyes, he saw the throne and the skeleton king boss lazily sitting on the throne and his minions. The guy still couldn't recover from the pain, and the skeletons were getting closer and closer. And here for the first time, the thought dawned on him that he could die here, something he had not felt so clearly until that moment. For the player, dungeons are dangerous. They literally risk their lives. He lay there completely helpless, feeling his heart stop, and he didn't have the strength to get up. And before his eyes there appeared the image of Eileen and Mendy, who were relying on him so much. Mendy, whose life depended on him. Having managed to ask for forgiveness, his heart as a player stopped beating. The heart of a demon was activated. The skeletons looked at the man lying in front of them with no signs of life. One of the dead men raised his weapon to stab the guy. The player's eye lit up with a red fire. Another entity was activated in it, replacing the person. Like lightning, Tyler jumped up just as the sword was about to fall on him. Then, with inhuman force, he struck the dead man. The skeleton flew backwards, which disabled the others. Tyler felt the beating of a new heart. The system gave a notification that a demon's heart was beating in him. He received 50% of the player's characteristics and does not feel fear. He felt an unprecedented lightness in his body and strength that he had not had before. Now he can easily defeat these skeletons. In a jump, he hit the head of the skeleton who was wearing a helmet. He, not expecting this from the man and his incredible strength, bent down to the ground. The helmeted head was pressed into the ground as if it were a rubber ball. Holding the skeleton's head in his hands, the guy waited in confusion for the system to notify him where his experience was. But armored knights have no weak points. Baldur's cursed sword will not be effective against them. He realized that these dead people were just the boss's puppets, and when he entered here, the boss battle had already begun. And with all his zeal, he rushed into the attack. He needed to get to the boss. The guy had incredible strength, movement, scope, flexibility, as if he was floating. He jumped up and cut down one after another. The feeling was different. There was excitement, a desire to hit again and again. He no longer had fear. The enemies were scattered into small fragments, each dragging the others along with it. The guy got into the swing of things, and now he can easily defeat them. Empty eye sockets gaped like black holes. The warriors' heads flew off their necks. Tyler had managed to pierce the armor now. With the demonic heart, it was nothing to him. He understood that by killing these servants, the king of this dead dungeon would remain, and by passing it, he would be able to get healing for Mendy. And now everyone was destroyed. The whole earth was strewn with scattered bones. Tyler was exhausted. He was finally able to put them down. Now he was alone. The boss of this dungeon looked at him, pulling out a huge sword. Our hero felt the pressure. The cave seemed to vibrate, such power. The boss, cutting through the stone blocks with lightning speed, jumped up from his throne and rushed towards the guy. The guy couldn't move from such a fierce power. The king rushed past with such a whirlwind that Tyler saw only a whirlwind. His ardor waned. But the guy was overcome by a silent numbness from the fact that there was a huge difference between him and the boss of this dungeon. He was already beginning to doubt that this was a level C dungeon, since the boss had just missed on purpose. Otherwise, there would have been nothing left of Tyler. Yes, he now has the heart of a demon and the bell of the undead, but every instinct he has is screaming at him to run. The guy stood with his mouth open, realizing more and more clearly that he would not be able to defeat this boss. The boss's red eyes were piercing, and he finally asked the player if he was human. Tyler opened his mouth, but suddenly he felt like he was being struck by electricity. He remembered the goddess. Then she cursed him, and then he killed that leader and increased his experience. Tyler replied that he was no longer human, although he was shaking all over. Then the Skeleton King declared that since he was not human, he had no reason to kill. The guy's head was spinning with thoughts about what was happening right now. The boss said that there was something familiar about the guy and ordered him to open and show the inventory. He stood a few steps below, and his face showed complete bewilderment. For the first time, a dungeon boss, and especially one like this, asks to show his inventory. He opened it and began to show the contents. When the guy showed the magazine with the girl on the cover, the Skeleton King squealed. But then he pulled himself together and, looking at the guy, said that he felt it in Tyler himself. Then our hero showed the pendant and asked if this is what he meant. The red balls kept their eyes on the pendant the guy was holding. The next second, tears of tenderness and happiness flowed down the bony skull, pulling the thing towards himself. The boss sobbed and muttered that after 100 years, he had finally found it. Suddenly, the object almost lost its outline, shining with a blinding blue light. This is the key of the Skylane tree. The level of this item is legendary, a sacred object guarded by elves for centuries. Incredibly, a legendary item dropped from a large beetle in the dungeon. Tyler couldn't take his eyes off the item. Should he take the risk and steal it? No, he couldn't defeat this monster. The system indicated that the player had activated the main quest. In front of him was a skeleton prince. It is not surprising that all the knights were wearing elven armor. The guy pressed the button to accept the conditions of the passage, but first he needs to return the key. The backstory is that the city of Skyline is a royal palace, an eternal harvest festival. The Harvest Festival is a sacred day for the elven people, and Prince Oset was having a carefree time surrounded by beautiful elven women. There was a treasury in the palace which was guarded, but the security was apparently not very good, considering that the key was stolen by goblins. After the key was lost, the barrier protecting the tree disappeared, and the dark elves went to war with the wood elves. Oset's recklessness led to the disaster, forcing the elves to strip him of his title and exile him. Oset wanted to correct the mistake and began a journey to find the key. However, in a foggy forest, he and his warriors were ambushed and died. None of his group survived. When the soul left the body, it was enslaved by evil, which changed his memory of who he was and his purpose. A dark force reigned over his soul even when Oset opened his eyes again. He was already imprisoned in this dungeon, locked in a burial ground, having received the title of Lord. 20 years ago, a man came to this dungeon. The Lord did not want to kill him, but the evil energy in his body forced him to do it. That's why the Lord asked him if he was a human, but what was evil energy? Because when he created the game, there was no such thing in it. Toda Tyler asked the skeleton if he could give him the lasso tears. He wanted to save someone. The former elven prince said that he once had one bottle, but he was locked in here for so long it was boring, so he drank it. The guy stood there listening to this with a stony face, how he wanted to hit him. He couldn't defeat it, but he can make soup out of it. But the Lord calmed Tyler down peacefully. No need to be angry. If you need to save someone, then this ring will be even better. Tears lasso is not the only way. Our hero looked at the artifact with his mouth open. It was a ring of roots created from the Skyline tree. The wearer of it gains immunity to all diseases. Tyler had tears in his eyes. This isn't just a good ring, it's better than lasso tears. But the dungeon boss said that the guy should help him in exchange for the ring. The guy swallowed and tensed, trying to figure out what they were asking him to do. The skeleton gave him a banishing artifact. Will Tyler be able to use it against them? He added that all these years the people who followed him were locked here, and with the help of this artifact, he can expel the evil energy from them. The guy took the artifact and asked in surprise, but they would all disappear then. But the dungeon lord reminded them that they had been dead for a long time. At this time, a green glow engulfed them and dozens of elven ghosts surrounded the space. Tyler stood in thought. This is a level B artifact. It can be sold for more than $1 million. Using it here is a waste of money. But if he doesn't use it here, he won't get the ring to heal Mendy. And then the guy decisively launched the activation of the item. Everything was covered in a blinding flash. The ghostly elves raised their heads and looked at the sphere opening above. Then, one by one, the deceased elves of Prince Osset began to rise up, saying goodbye to the prince. The dungeon lord said goodbye to each of his former warriors. They stood with Tyler and watched as the greenish spheres of the souls of the deceased finally left the burial ground. When the souls left the cave, Tyler, with wide eyes, asked the Lord why he was still there, to which he replied that he was too strong and the bell of the undead could not drive him out. Taylor thought angrily that if this boss didn't die, then nothing would drop from him, but this elven prince should drop a ton of equipment. He carefully asked the skeleton if he did not die. How would he leave the dungeon? Then the Lord explained that he would open the teleportation gate. A second later, the guy saw a sphere on the ground, and it was that very gate. He felt himself beginning to fall into weightlessness. The former elven prince handed him a letter, asking him to pass it on to his father if Tyler saw it. The guy took the letter, stood in the teleportation circle, and felt himself being drawn in. The Lord, locked in the burial ground, accompanied him until the player disappeared from the cave. In his hands, he held a magazine that remained from Tyler's inventory. Then, opening the magazine and looking at the girls, he said that he really wanted to go outside. These cuties looked cuter than those who surrounded him in the palace. The Dungeon King was so captivated by the magazine with the girls that he forgot to tell this guy something. Oh, he forgot to say that he doesn't know where the gate will take him. That's the problem. After the disappearance of the art actress, the Dark Elves occupied the entire front, attacking people. It was the most brutal attack in history. Huge winged monsters tore people to pieces. The young guy, who was about to be torn apart by the monster, called the captain and begged for help. In a split second, the young man covered the guy, asking for help with his body, and hit the monster in the side with his elbow. The creature writhed in pain, screaming hysterically. The armored savior still did not relax and tensely awaited new attacks. The second guy, who had almost been torn apart, was still lying on the ground. Finally, the one who had overtaken the monster turned to his friend, extended his hand, and asked if he was okay. It was Jacques from the Actors Guild, captain of the second attack team. The second one stood up and sadly announced that 2 members of their team were dead. In desperation, he told the captain that there was no point in this war. These bastards hide in the darkness and control the monsters, and then attack. To his last words that they could not win, the guy who saved him passionately declared that until their leader returned, they must become the first line of defense for humanity. But the victims, sobbing, began to cry that their leader had been gone for a month, and he was terribly afraid. "If she doesn't come back, they will die," he continued, still sobbing. Suddenly, a scarlet petal appeared in the air, shimmering and slowly swirling as it descended to the ground. The boys froze in tension as more and more petals appeared, falling from the sky. Jacques opened his mouth and extended his hand, and one of these petals landed on his palm. The giant tree turned red, everything turned purple, and it was from it that these strange petals were falling. One of those present blew a horn, and the enemies began to retreat. Together with the winged monsters, they quickly glanced around and began to leave. Jacques didn't like all this. Something was wrong here, while his friend was sincerely glad that they were saved. Looking at the still falling petals, the captain asked out loud why they retreated if they had the advantage. The core of the giant tree pulsed with increasing speed. A red flame appeared over the city. The guys looked into the distance and shuddered. Then some black, hard objects, similar to stones, began to rain down. When one of the guild members wanted to lift it, Jean shouted that it was not necessary. It was too dangerous. But Claude, that was the name of the young man who just a minute ago was jumping for joy that the enemies had retreated, took the object in his hands. Suddenly, the black solid object began to change color and became fiery red. And a second later, there was a roar, then an explosion accompanied by a bright flash. Afterwards, he couldn't figure out what had just happened. Everything around was smoking, and he was sitting on the ground. and after a few more seconds, these black stones began to fall and explode. There were more and more of them. Claude lost control and screamed why this happened and what the hell this was. He heard a scream that it was all these elven bastards. The roots of the tree and the tree itself began to ooze water. It was a dead country. It was here that Tyler teleported, looking around the place of his arrival in shock. He didn't understand where he was at all, feverishly trying to figure out what kind of place this was. He began to walk slowly. It was gloomy all around, fog and tree roots. Then he saw cocoons hanging on the tree branches, resembling a vacuum with water. What kind of joke is this? The guy thought. And then it dawned on him. This was the deepest floor of the skyline tree, the resting place of the elven people and the most difficult dungeon. Land of the Dead, difficult dungeons of level A, group capacity up to 20 people. And this skeleton sent him to such a nasty place. Tyler stopped in front of a tree with a hanging blue cocoon, looking at it closely. Suddenly, the root took the shape of a bony hand and began to crawl towards him, after which some creature the color of a tree trunk fell from above. It was a scary monster crawling on the ground, a dead elf of level 51. It wriggled on the ground, its root arms resembling an incomprehensible mass in the form of spreading mud. But the guy clearly saw the formation of a sharp claw-like thing. Suddenly, with a deafening roar, the monster jumped up and rushed at Tyler, who barely managed to pull out his protective swords in front of his chest. But the forces were unequal. The monster had too high a level. The creature was very strong. The guy could barely hold on. Did the dead really have no weak points, he thought, and saw a red line running across the monster's body. He realized that this was some kind of channel giving this entity strength, and if he wanted to win, he needed to cut this channel. A huge head with an open mouth approached Tyler. The creature moved with a sword hand towards our hero, who barely managed to make a sweep. As the monster flew over, the boy reached for the red line. Having cut the line, the monster fell to the ground with a howl. This was its end. Tyler happily looked at the system and found 1,200 experience points. He just needed to get to the weak spot, and that's it. Clicking on the panel, he stopped and went cold. How could he forget? This dungeon is hard to clear because there is a time limit. This is a resting place for the dead. No place for the living, which means that if he doesn't clear it out quickly, we ourselves will become dead. He stood in a state of shock. The cocoons on the branches began to ooze profusely. The guy realized that something not very good was about to happen. The cocoons began to turn into water streams surrounding the player. He can deal with a monster one-on-one, but if they all attack together, it's certain death. Tyler ran with all his might from the monsters pursuing him, calling on the stupid skeleton to bring him back. But the former elven prince did not hear the call. He was very busy with the bodies of the girls in the magazine and evaluating their parameters. Suddenly he sneezed, then thought about what had happened. Do skeletons sneeze? No, it's something else, but what? Dozens of dead corpses resembling roots lay sprawled on the ground. Tyler was barely able to stand on his feet and was leaning on his weapon. He needed to at least catch his breath. Then he looked at his hand. Some bluish spots were appearing on his hand. And a moment later, the hand began to turn into a gnarled branch with claws like those monsters. Tyler screamed. He was being controlled. His hand turned towards his face, ready to tear it apart. Then he remembered about the ring. It is created from the roots of the skyline tree, so it can deal with the virus. He quickly took the ring out of his inventory and pulled it onto his finger. He realized what he had caught. It was a zombie virus, a ring of roots. This is the land of the dead. A stupid skeleton sent him here. Suddenly there was movement. Tyler felt a hum. The cocoons around him began to move. They started attacking him from all sides, a bunch of tree-like monsters. The guy shouted for them to stay away. In order to save himself, he quickly activated his demon form when the monsters were already grabbing him. But then something incredible happened. A powerful column of light engulfed the guy and everything around him. Something rushed at great speed like a meteorite. Pink flashes covered the entire space of the dungeon. Tyler blinked his eyes in bewilderment, unable to understand what it was. Then the pink flame began to form some features. A figure began to appear in it. And then a girl in armor with a shield and weapons came out of the flames. It was the actress, the goddess of art, the strongest of the players. And then our hero realized that he was saved, but he didn't understand why she was here and not on the front lines. The actress took a serious pose, preparing to repel an attack. Her whole appearance expressed unshakable seriousness. Stop, so she wants to attack him. But why? What went wrong again? He realized that he was lost. In the form of a demon, he looked like an enemy to her. If he had a chance to defeat the dead, then against her there was no chance. The goddess stood in a pose ready to accept the attack. She did not utter a word. But then she lowered her weapon and her face took on a thoughtful, childish expression. He was a demon, but for some reason she felt something so familiar in him, as if she had known him for a long time. At this time, serious negotiations were taking place at the players' main office. Bianca reported to the boss about yesterday's explosion, which affected many players of the association. Many were injured. Everything was burning on the front lines. Many players were killed, and many more were missing. And the Great Rift Valley village of Dara is crowded with people. Bianca continued reporting that the front line was lost. The surviving players retreated to Darren Village. If the skyline tree continues to explode, the explosions will reach them too. In a month, everything more than 500 meters from the tree will turn into a fiery hell. Sheldon, smoking a cigar, asked what his superiors thought about this. The assistant reported that the authorities expect them to give it their all and stop the explosions. If they cannot stop them, the city will have to be evacuated. Getting up, he asked what they had heard about the goddess of art. Bianca replied that everything was still fine. Then the boss, leaving, asked her to notify the players that tomorrow they would go to the tree for the last time. But they will wait for the goddess. She could not disappear without a trace. At this time, the goddess sniffed Tyler. He already thought that she wanted to eat him. Her simple-minded question knocked him down when she asked him for food, since she hadn't eaten anything for more than half a month. Tyler received a notification that the demon transformation skill had ended, and he turned into a man, to which the goddess asked in surprise how he became a man again. The guy hesitated and then said, if he said that he was originally a man, but because of the curse of the goddess he became a demon, she would believe him. But the actress sniffed him and said that she could smell a lie. He had never been human. Continuing to sniff Tyler, she made him think that she had become completely stupid from hunger and was no longer human. Then he opened his inventory and rummaged around until he found a loaf of bread, which he handed to the goddess. She ate it in the blink of an eye, then another and another. The guy didn't have time to take them out of the inventory. She ate all his supplies and left nothing for him. The guy almost cried. In general, she is a bit stupid. Tyler looked at the girl appraisingly. It's amazing how she became an actress of the goddess's art. Wiping away the crumbs, she answered innocently that she had no idea how, 6 months ago, when the game invaded the Earth, she became it. The guy closed his mouth in shock. He didn't say anything out loud. Was she reading minds? Then she approached him and said that this was her passive skill, namely pure hearing. Within 5 meters, she could read people's thoughts, and although he spoke badly of her, she was not angry, since he was not a villain. Pointing her finger upwards, she drew a safe distance. The guy realized that it was better for her to never find out that he was a game designer, otherwise she would kill him. Then the goddess, assuming a warlike appearance, asked him how to leave this place. She's been fighting here for a month now, but monsters don't die that easily in this place. And it doesn't matter whether she attacks, burns, buries, or uses magic. The girl explained all the techniques in detail and repeated them again, but the monsters did not die. Tyler once again concluded for himself that she was not very smart. If he had her power, he would have dealt with the land of the dead long ago. But out loud, he said in the tone of a teacher explaining a lesson to a first grader that this was the land of the dead, so it would be impossible to kill them. If she wants to leave this region, she needs to kill the local boss. Then she asked if he knew where the boss was. She had been here for more than a month and hadn't seen him. Then the guy pointed his finger up and replied that the boss was higher. Before he could finish, the girl prepared to jump up. The light became so bright that the boy covered his eyes with his hand and closed them tightly. Like a meteor, she rushed upward without even looking back. He watched her walk away with his mouth open. The place where she stood was illuminated by a bright flash. The ground vibrated. After which she landed back, blood dripping from her lip, and for a couple of seconds she said nothing. Then she killed Tyler by telling him that she couldn't defeat this boss, after which he pompously remarked that this was a dungeon, and even with her strength she wouldn't be able to defeat it alone. He wanted to add something else but did not have time because there was a crash behind him, as if a bomb had exploded. A huge creature with glowing eyes appeared behind him. The guy let out a muffled cry. It was a level 90 monster, the former king of the elves enslaved by evil and became the guardian of the land of the dead. This boss walked making a cracking sound with his size, and he had a huge sword in his hands. Thaler became completely horrified, realizing that he apparently would not be able to escape from this cave. The goddess also stood in a pose ready to accept the last mortal battle. A level 90 boss with an elven holy sword in his hand, it's no wonder the Valkyrie can't defeat him. But as the king of the elves became the boss of the land of the dead. What is it, evil energy? Why does someone change its settings? Tyler and the goddess stood guard, waiting and doing nothing. But what happened next, no one expected. The boss pointed his finger at the guy and yelled that he was a damn thief. Our hero stood in complete bewilderment as to what had just happened, and the monster pointed at him. After which Tyler rummaged through his inventory and pulled out a pendant and asked the boss if this was what he was looking for. He stared at the medallion without taking his red eyes off it and asked Tyler where he got it from. Tyler explained that his son Osset asked him to give this to him. He also handed over a letter that Osset had also asked to be delivered to his father. Meanwhile, dead players lay everywhere and clouds of explosions rose up. A teleportation portal opened from where one could be transported from the dungeon of the dead. The goddess and Tyler were transported through the portal, and a few seconds later they were standing in the city. The first thing the guy saw was flying scarlet petals. The Skyland tree blossomed. It's very strange because he had the key. Then why did the tree bloom? The tree itself took on a crimson hue, and petals were scattered throughout the city. The goddess approached the player lying on the ground. He was unconscious. She put her hands on him and tried to heal him, but the system said that the player's health was too low and it was impossible to heal him. The guy opened his eyes and smiled. The Liber returned. He asked not to waste his strength on him. There was no help here. The captain and the others were waiting for her at the tree. Tyler said that they need to hurry. Without the key, no matter how many players there are, they won't be able to overcome the tree. She quickly and confidently took his hand so that the guy shuddered. Then she picked up Tyler, who didn't have time to answer, and said that she would carry him. 1,000 questions were written on his face as they soared upward. The speed increased so much that everything before his eyes became blurry. They arrived at the royal court of the Skyline tree. This was the main core of the entire game system on Earth. Teleportation brought them here. In the middle of the courtyard, at the roots of the tree, there was a dome, and players gathered around it. Inside the dome, the players of the elven race stood with evil grins. Sheldon rushed to break through the sphere. He was called Thunder Armadillo. He used to be an ordinary mercenary, but after the game's invasion of the Earth, he acquired the power of the god of lightning. Along with the acquired skills, he absorbed other associations, and after which he became the head of the associations of this city. His Thunder Fist was used to break through the villain's dome, while another player tried to break through with a huge sledgehammer. One of the players in gear called the Dark Elves vile cowards who are afraid to fight and just hide. The Dark Elf King. Neo, still grinning, replied that stupid humans without a key would not be able to break through the barrier. All they could do was watch as the tree destroyed the world. Fighting with hot-tempered people was not suitable for him, and he stated this. The player cursed. These creatures won't come out from there, and it's impossible to break through the barrier. Then he was distracted because he heard some kind of rumble coming from underground. A few seconds later, the goddess appeared with Tyler in her arms. The players began to speak in admiration as the goddess of art arrived, and looking at Tyler, they asked who she escaped from the land of the dead. It doesn't look like she defeated the king. His mood changed from complacency to irritation, and some strange feeling appeared. After which he opened his mouth looking at Tyler. This is coming from this man. Tyler stood with his back to the elf, and a key hung on his chest. The guy looked at the barrier without listening to anyone. The players were buzzing that this rabbit hunter had lost his mind. If even Armadillo couldn't break through the barrier, then this guy looked as if he could do it. Tyler was getting closer and closer to the sphere. King Neo hysterically ordered him to stop. He had the key. The players rushed into battle shouting to kill the scoundrels and avenge their fallen brothers. A massacre began on the field, while Tyler got lost in the crowd. He found himself in the royal palace in the Hall of Holy Relics. He walked up to the stand intended for the key and took out the key. The system has approved confirmation and access to the skyline tree. The tree is activated. Stop it, yes or no. The guy clicked yes. Then the system warned that forced activation stop would destroy the tree, confirm the process. Tyler pressed yes. Meanwhile, the city streets were strewn with scarlet petals. Passers-by looked at the petals and noticed an unusual glow. The tree began to shine. A woman with a little girl passed by and also looked at this unusual phenomenon, fascinated. The child began to collect petals, saying that she wanted to give them to her dad. Her father was a captain from the Actors Guild. Eileen, sitting in the hospital room and peeling an apple, looked anxiously at the falling petals and thought about Tyler. Is everything okay with him? He has been gone for 2 weeks. A tree branch with large scarlet buds was visible through the window. Suddenly the city shook from a powerful roar coming from the tree. Black whirlwinds engulfed the trunk. In the blink of an eye, the buds withered and fell off, revealing dry branches. The whole city watched as the tree underwent another transformation. Meanwhile, the Dark Elf King stood in the sphere, preparing to repel the attack. The goddess rushed at the sphere like lightning, plunging her weapon into it. Then came another thunderous blow from Sheldon, the elf holding back the breakthrough. He said, smiling, that it was all useless. Even with the power of the lightning god, he was still a human. But there was a crack and the barrier was broken. Neo screamed that his power was disappearing. It cannot be how a person got access to control of the tree and how it happened. The barrier was finally destroyed, and the goddess went after the king. The elf, still not understanding what was happening, screamed that this couldn't be. The next minute, branches fell with a crash and the tree began to crumble. The players, forgetting about the battle, began to defend themselves from the falling tree debris. Panic began. People shouted that they had to retreat. The tree was about to collapse. The system announced that the tree had fallen. Some player shouted, "Hooray, victory!" This time the people won. Goddess, Sheldon, and other players came to the city cemetery of dead players. There was also a woman with her daughter who wanted to collect petals for her father. Everyone stood in mournful silence to honor the fallen players. They laid a bouquet on the grave of the fallen commander, the father of that very little girl. The woman and the girl could not hold back their tears. So many relatives died. 2,032 brave souls lost their lives during the Skyland tree disaster. They will forever be remembered as heroes who fought for humanity. Mendy opened her eyes and sat up, causing complete shock to the nurse who entered. The girl looked out the window, enchanted at the scarlet petals. They informed the doctor that the seriously ill patient had regained consciousness. Tyler was already in the room, and the girl told him that she was hungry. The guy beamed with happiness as he told his daughter that he now had plenty of money and would buy her the most delicious dishes. But Eileen immediately pounced on him, yelling that he was a blockhead and didn't know how to be a father, that the child had just recovered from a serious illness, and that she couldn't be fed who knows what. The goddess knocked on the door, but now, like an ordinary girl, she did not expect that Tyler had a child. With a sigh, she entered the room and was immediately engulfed in a glow. Then she changed her form to divine, and Mendy rose up after her. Aileen, shaking with fear, babbled to Tyler what was wrong with Mendy, but the guy couldn't answer. He didn't understand anything. Then Mendy, guided by the goddess, lifted Eileen into the air. Tyler screamed, "What the hell is going on here?" At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and the image of the goddess told me to come in. The actress entered, but in the form of a human. The guy looked at her without understanding anything. The goddess said that the last time she came to this world, she lost all her divine powers and did not expect that they would be in her body. Approaching her, Tyler asked, "So she is a real goddess of art?" The girl sighed sadly and replied that on the one hand, yes, on the other, no. Without her powers, she is no longer a goddess. Then the guy asked if she came here to recuperate. The glowing image closed its eyes and remained silent, preparing to answer something. Finally, she leaned towards his ear and quietly said that she had come to tell him that this game was still going on, and if he wanted to survive, he had to win by any means possible. From the faces merged, she half dissolved into his face, after which she disappeared and Mendy collapsed onto the bed. The girl playing the role of the goddess was also completely perplexed. Mendy immediately turned to her adoptive father, asking who this little sister was. She was so cute. Referring to the girl who blushed and began to remember why she came here in the first place. Large gaps appeared in the inner area, and bats flew out from there. after which the claws of a creature of truly gigantic proportions appeared, after which a flying monster flew out resembling a snake, a dragon, and a bat at the same time. The players stood in the dungeon asking where all the monsters went. There was no one here. The group started to talk about how the Skyland tree had collapsed. Monsters would no longer appear. Many players were horrified, as they had taken out loans, and now they would have to pay it all back. The main street in the city was empty. There were always a lot of players here. Now on the streets you could see former players selling their uniforms for pennies. The players became unemployed, and the city streets became a dangerous place where crimes were committed every minute. Some former players have taken up robbing stores. Beatings, robberies, threats of murder. People were outraged that if the association did not begin to control the players, the city would become a crime capital. A meeting of clan leaders was taking place in the Players Association building. The girl who had recently been a goddess felt embarrassed, ashamed of herself for passing out in his hospital room. The girl fidgeted nervously, looking at Tyler, wondering if the guy knew that she liked him. The leader of the Green Sheep Guild scornfully remarked that things were getting worse and worse in the association, since they were allowing all sorts of vagabonds to join the guild. He was referring to Tyler, but the player fighting the Dark Elves stated that if it weren't for him, everyone would have died. Approaching Tyler, she introduced herself as the leader of the Chamber of Commerce, offering services for the purchase of goods, promising to give diamond rank membership. Tyler was flattered and embarrassed at the same time. Shaking the girl's hand, he thanked her. The player who just stood up for Tyler asked why she was giving away diamond rank for nothing. They worked so hard and only got gold, but the girl simply replied, why not? She likes him. A fit of jealousy overcame the goddess girl. She stood up demonstratively and noticed that Mr. Tyler had a daughter, to which the representative of the trade guild, without embarrassment, stated that she was aware her guild pays great attention to collecting information, and she also knows that he adopted a child during the disaster. And at the moment Mr. Tyler is alone, then thoughtfully asked the goddess, and how does she know, was digging under him, that she also likes him. She blushed, jumped up, and indignantly shouted something nonsense. Finally, one of the leaders yelled, "Enough! Tyler this, Tyler that. He's just trash who relies on women. Let's check what he's made of." But he froze when the girls turned to him and ordered him to shut up. Tyler thought that if he had known how the meeting would turn out, he would never have gone. 2 days ago, someone rang his doorbell, and when he opened the door, he saw Sheldon. The guy was quite surprised at what he owed to such a visit. But upon receiving the invitation, he almost lost consciousness. 3 who receive it have the highest privileges of the association, including an excellent monthly salary. While the boy was happy that he no longer had to hunt monsters with the others, the rabbit hunt resumed. After the collapse of the Skyline tree, the life of players noticeably worsened, the quality of weapons dropped sharply, monsters were rare to meet. Sheldon didn't stay long at Tyler's and refused tea and buns. The player sarcastically noted that if they had come here later, this building mice and bats circling above them appeared on the screen. And then incredible monsters that had never been seen before appeared for all to see. They were gigantic in size, extremely powerful, and had never been defeated by any player. The representative of the Merchant Guild asked if these weren't the deep pits of the abyss of the neighboring country. Bianca confirmed that high-level monsters began to emerge from the deep pits of the abyss. A representative of one of the guilds happily jumped up. What are they waiting for? If they don't find work, then the guilds won't last long. Bianca noted that the association thinks that these monsters have the same properties as the Skyline tree. The representative, who had previously called Tyler trash, chuckled again. Foreign players had already moved there. What was the point of their association if they were working at a snail's pace? Bianca's face changed. Holding her glasses, she barely restrained herself from breaking down. Everyone saw the way she looked at him. The guild representative thought that this guy had just angered 3 girls, and it was better not to touch these girls. A month ago, a meeting of the headquarters of a neighboring country took place, from where new monsters emerged. The head of the association announced that 3 cities have already been lost. The players of the country of Zorgius are the strongest. Why not ask them for help? The officer of the Ministry of Emergency Situations replied that it was precisely because that country had the highest-level players that they would take out everything that could be taken out of the pit of the abyss. The representative of the Moro Country Players Association interjected that his association would be able to handle the deep abyss. They had the best guild. A member of another country stated that his people from the Ninja Guild and the White Ghosts would be arriving here tomorrow to provide support. One of the members said that they would then pay compensation for such an unexpected request. The representative of the Players Association of the country where the meeting was held yelled, calling everyone idiots who would soon regret not inviting the guild from Zorgius. The man glanced at him from under his glasses and calmly, but at the same time coldly added that so that he would not forget who he was, the title of head of the association was bestowed by him and he could take it away. It worked and the chief fell silent in fear. Meanwhile, in association with our heroes, Bianca reported that the association had held negotiations with representatives of the city in which the abysses are located more than 3 times. So that side knows about the success in clearing the skyline tree and getting a large number of items. One of the guild members jumped up in indignation. How is this possible? They obtained these items with blood and sweat. So many brothers died, they will never accept such conditions. But Sheldon interrupted him and noticed that they weren't finished yet. Advised the player to stop throwing words around and look at the screen. Bianca pointed to the screen and asked to take a look. The black dragon of the deep abyss Kabata crushed everything in its path. Skyscrapers burned. People were burning alive in the flames of fire. Some were living out their last minutes. The little boy, bursting into tears, called for his parents. The players ran in all directions, as everything was on fire and in smoke. The dragon spewed streams of fiery flames from which everything perished. The video showed one of the players, mad with horror, cowering against the wall and asking not to come closer. He didn't want to die. Everyone sat silently. A monster appeared on the screen that froze everything with one breath. One of the guild members, impressed by what he saw, said that this dragon was like a walking siege weapon. The representative, who had recently been shouting about impudence, asked in confusion when this had happened. Bianca replied that the state in which these abyssal monsters were reborn sent a video yesterday based on news reports. A deep pit of the abyss erupted with a catastrophe surpassing the level of the skyline tree. As a result, 3 large guilds were exterminated, 6,000 players died in battles, and more than 35,000 died in total. Sheldon cleared his throat to break the silence and said he wanted to be blunt. The war with Skyline had recently ended. Each guild had suffered significant losses, and the leadership had no plans to use them to suppress new unrest. But the situation, according to forecasts, is that the city will be destroyed in less than 3 months, and their country will also be affected. He added that he had gathered them all to introduce someone to them when a man entered the room. The guild member threw a scornful glance at them, as after they had finished him off, he came to ask for their help. Sheldon said that there was no need to say that. This gentleman wanted to ask for help a month ago. That's when he contacted them. The authorities decided to help his country. The association and the group of actors of the goddess's art reached an agreement, and an expeditionary assistance is being prepared. The representative who entered the hall bowed and asked everyone for help. Everyone sat in silence. No one dared to speak. Then Sheldon asked the outraged one why he was silent. Wasn't he happy? The guy replied that he wanted to go, but he didn't want his brothers to sacrifice their lives for nothing. The man asking for help burst into tears, asking to save his country. Suddenly, a chair flew with a crash, and one of the guild members, who had managed to make enemies in the girls' faces, answered, "What did they do when it all started? He doesn't care about that country. This whole meeting is pointless. He's leaving." He was not interested in continuing the dialogue any further. The girl who had her eye on Tyler said goodbye after him. As she left, she ominously told the goddess to be careful. If anything happened to her, Tyler Jones would be hers. Meanwhile, cars were racing along the highway. Among them were those whom Tyler was harassing. The guild representative and another player under his command were riding and talking about the killer of his younger brother. The guy handed the chief a photo of Tyler as the alleged killer and the clues he had managed to get. The guild leader said with wide eyes, "Well, he knows him. This is the player who was at today's meeting." He digested the information, so this is the same guy that the girls were clinging to. His subordinate added that something interesting came to light during the investigation. His name is Tyler Jones. 3 months ago, he was considered a rookie who earned the title of rabbit hunter because he hunted only horned rabbits for 6 months, afraid of dying. Afterwards, he was cursed by the goddess and never hunted rabbits again. What's even more interesting is that this rabbit hunter appeared in another notification. The assistant continued to report that it was also incredible that in less than a day, he had received a task from a drunkard to obtain a mission of historical rank. The guild leader angrily grimaced and clarified that it was certain that this player had killed his brother. The guy answered, when all 3 factors coincide, it is already a pattern. There are also suspicions that this guy is connected with the god of raids, and if they manage to contact the god of raids through him, then in 6 months their guild will become the strongest in this city, and perhaps even in the world. But he noticed that this guy was friends with the actress. If they did suffer before sending him to the next world. Tyler sat at the computer and checked the information about the monsters from the abyss. The fire-breathing dragon should sit and guard the dragon eggs, and the destructive power should be lower. After what happened with the tree, Tyler knew this wasn't the game he was making. He zoomed in on the photo of the dragon, and the spot on his head resembled a human figure. Well, yes, a figurine of a little man. Does this mean that someone is controlling the dragon? Someone stronger than the dragon uses it as a mount. He remembered the words of the goddess's spirit that the game was not over, and if he wanted to survive, he had to win in every possible way. Game of the gods. It all looks exactly like this. Monsters are getting out of the system's control. He remembered Father Osset, who thanked him for his release before he died. The guy figured out that this was still the game he was creating, a game that had invaded the earth or something else entirely. He racked his brains. A bunch of sketches of monsters lay in front of him. What kind of evil energy controlled the elf king? He was distracted by Mendy, who brought him tea, which was so opportune. He stroked the baby's head and called her a good girl. Suddenly, a purple flame was reflected in her eyes. Turning his head, he saw something rushing towards them. At the last minute, Tyler caught Mandy as he jumped out of the apartment. It was something incomprehensible, a huge purple lilac explosion. He landed as carefully as possible, hugging the girl to himself. Mendy was clearly nauseous and had not yet come to her senses. 2 of the guild stood in front of him. The leader said that he knew he wouldn't die just like that, pointing at Tyler. The guy indignantly asked what they were doing here and whether they were afraid of the wrath of the association. The leader laughed. The association was that if he wanted something, no one and nothing would stop him. Then, looking at Tyler with a glare, he asked if he had killed his brother. Tyler pulled out his sword and asked if he meant the owner of this sword. The leader became mad with anger and declared that he would die immediately. He rushed towards the guy at full speed, drawing his weapon forward. Tyler's devil mark was activated, and he waited to see what kind of fight he would give. He began to scan the weak points of the enemy rushing towards him. There were many of these points, and so they clashed, but the leader was strong. Anger and fury gave him strength. He told Tyler that he was inspired by the idea of making him his dog. At that moment, our hero cut his sword with his own. Fear, confusion, and bewilderment were reflected on the leader's face. The assistant shouted at the chief to be careful with this kid. He seemed angry. He replied that he had a lot of weapons, and let's see how long Tyler can hold out. With these words, he pulled out a new sword from his inventory and eagerly rushed at the guy. A new clash began. It was clear that the leader did not like such resistance from Tyler, whom he did not even consider an opponent. The guy chuckled and said that compared to the Valkyrie's attacks, his attacks weren't even noticeable. This made the attacker even more furious. Logic went out the window. His assistant worriedly told him not to accidentally kill this player. He knows a lot of things. The goddess saw the rumblings and guessed that they were coming from Tyler Jones's house. Sheldon, as usual, sat in his office and listened to Bianca's report on the battles between the players of his association. She then listed everyone by name, and this happens at Tyler Jones's house. Sheldon didn't hide his anger. It looked like his guild had decided to kill each other.